Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I can't shake the sound of her breathing. I heard it through the phone first, ragged and shallow, as if someone was gasping awake from a nightmare. The dispatcher's voice had been clipped, urgent. 911, hang up at 312 Willow Drive. Line is still open. I remember that dark hour, the kind of night where even the moon hides, when the radio static sounds too loud and the walls of the station feel like they might close in on you. I slid into the cruiser, rain spitting against the windshield, wipers swiping in lazy arcs. The streetlights were dim, spaced too far apart, and every time I passed one, the glass lens buzzed like it was about to shatter. By the time I reached Willow Drive, the rain was heavier, fine droplets that clung to my jacket and pooled in the cracks of the road. The houses there are old build-yourself projects from decades ago. Porches sag under their own weight. Lawns go untended. I parked on the curb, left the engine running. My radio crackled with the dispatcher's last words before silence swallowed the channel. Line still open. No voice. I stepped out, boots squelching in mud, flashlight in hand. The porch light of 312 was dead, just a bare bulb socket dripping water. I knocked once, loud enough to echo down the empty street. No answer. I tried the door. It swung open on its hinges, rotten wood groaning. Inside, the air was warmer than I expected, thick with the smell of mildew and something else. Cigarette smoke, stale and acrid. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I crossed the threshold. The hallway wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing yellowed plaster beneath. Footsteps left wet prints on the second-hand carpet, leading deeper into the house. I followed. The living room was sparse. A threadbare sofa, a coffee table covered in cigarette butts and ash. A television sat on a stand, screen cracked, remote missing. On the floor lay a single shoe, women's size 7, white canvas, soaked and caked with mud. I crouched, picked it up. The insole was torn, and inside there was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. Scratched in messy handwriting. Help me. No name, no address, just 2 words underlined. I clipped a photo of it, held it in front of my face. The photograph didn't come through well in the dim light, but I could make out a drawing. A stick figure standing inside a circle, limbs splayed. A ring around its head. Beneath, another line. They watch. That's when I heard a noise behind me, soft and damp, like something sliding across the floor. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. I spun. Empty. Only the hallway stretching behind, shadows pooling under the archway. I dropped the paper into my coat pocket and moved toward the kitchen door. The smell grew stronger, metallic, like blood. I flicked the flashlight across the linoleum. A trail of droplets, tiny and dark, led from the counter to the backyard door. My gloves squeaked as I stepped over them. At the threshold, I saw muddy footprints on the wooden deck heading toward the side gate. I paused, hand on my holster, then reached for my radio. Dispatch, I've got footprints leading out back. Starting a perimeter check. The reply was calm. Copy that. Backup en route. I clicked off and opened the gate. Rain poured in from above, soaking my hair. The yard was overgrown, taller than me in spots. Fence boards rotten, hanging askew. The footprints stopped at a tarp draped over something large. I approached slowly, boot heels crunching on debris. The tarp moved slightly, then stilled. I whistled softly. "Hey, I'm police. Come out with your hands up." No response. I yanked the tarp aside. Underneath lay a bicycle. Children's size, paint chipped. I frowned. The area was too derelict for kids to play here. Yet, the mud on the tire matched the prints. I scanned the yard. To my left, a narrow gap between this fence and the next, just wide enough for someone to slip through. The rain washed away half of the evidence. I realized then, whoever was here didn't want to be found. I unholstered my flashlight and swept the darkness. The yard ended at an alley, which I couldn't see in the gloom. I thought I heard something. A breath, a shuffle. My hand rose to my chest, resting on the grip of my sidearm, but I didn't draw. I know that by the time fascination gives way to fear, you won't think straight. Better to stay calm, survey methodically. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no text. Battery at 92%. A text message lit up the screen. "Why didn't you wait for me?" No sender ID. I stared at it. Then the porch light upstairs flickered on for a second, illuminating the bathroom window. I aimed my flashlight at it. Empty bathtub, faucet dripping. Water splashed on the tiled floor, but the drain was bone dry. When I looked back outside, the window was dark again. Everything felt too still, like the night itself was holding its breath. My radio crackled. Backup is 5 minutes out. Sustained rain might slow them. I rubbed my temples. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. I forced myself to move, to look for clues rather than chase shadows. I stepped back through the gate and toward the side yard. There, half hidden behind a bush, was a child's doll, one glass eye missing, matted hair drenched with rain. I pressed my flashlight on it. The remaining eye reflected back. An empty stare. I dropped the doll in my hand. What are we dealing with? I silenced the question inside my head. I'd seen enough to call in specialists, detectives, forensics, but none of that mattered until I secured the scene. I backed out of the yard, closing the gate behind me. The house loomed, dark, gaping windows staring like hollow skulls. On the porch, the single shoe waited, alone in the damp. I paused at my cruiser. The engine hummed, lights on, ready to burn rubber down the road. Part of me wanted to leave. That instinct you get when your gut says you've stepped into something you weren't prepared for. But the radio said backup was nearly there, and leaving felt irresponsible. I yanked open the rear door, placed evidence markers at the front door, at the footprints, at the doll. I retrieved a bag for the shoe and the coffee mug shards clogging the hallway. Every detail mattered. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. I looked up at the sky. Clouds so low they seemed to press on the rooftops, blurring the line between earth and storm. A crow cawed from a nearby tree. I shone my flashlight at it. The bird lifted off, wings wet, and vanished into the rain. I turned back to the house. The front door corridor was empty, the markers crisp. No sign of footprints leading back in. When backup pulled up, 2 squad cars, they stayed at the edge of the street until I waved them forward. The lead officer nodded and slipped on gloves. He asked me what I had. I handed over the shoe, the doll, the mug pieces, and the folded note. His face went cold when he read, "They watch." He radioed for detectives. I climbed back into my cruiser, shook free rein, and rubbed my arms. The heat from the engine seeped into my jacket. I watched them work under the glow of their spotlights. They weren't mine to command, so I sat in silence, listening to their footsteps on wet asphalt, the camera shutters clicking. the muffled voices over the radio. I knew I should file a report, collect witness statements, canvass the neighborhood. But I was frozen, thinking about that breathing on the line, the uneven footprints, the doll's glass eye staring into nothing. I turned off the engine, left the headlights on. The house faded into shadows, the markers small and bright. Behind me, the road stretched empty into the night. I thought of her breath, of someone alive in that hollow place. I wondered who she was, if she was still out there, and if I was too late. I sat in the cruiser with the engine off, letting the rain wash over the windshield, replaying every detail. The dispatcher's words lingered. They watch. I kept staring at that note in my glove box, its jagged edges pressed flat from the night's chaos. The doll's glass eye, the single shoe on the porch, the muddy footprints. None of it fit a normal missing person call. My gut told me there was someone inside that house, or someone who'd been there, someone who still might be. When I finally climbed out again, the air felt colder. I had backup officers on scene, but by now they'd retreated into the house, chasing faint clues I'd uncovered. I lingered at the edge of the yard, flashlight off, listening to the soft click of the gate swinging in the wind. Streetlights overhead buzzed and popped, sending quicksilver shadows dancing across the unkempt lawn. I pulled my jacket tighter and approached the back fence. The gap between the boards had widened, just enough to slip through. Leaning close, I trained my flashlight into the alley beyond. Puddles glimmered, a slick surface reflecting a broken line of light. I stepped carefully, boots slipping on oily leaves. My breath fogged in the beam. Somewhere down that alley, a door stood ajar. No porch light, no lock securing it. I radioed in, voice low. I'm checking the alley. Possible entry point. No answer. The channel was busy with forensics and detectives. Fine. I moved in. The alley was tight. Trash bins, discarded furniture, a stray tire leaning against a brick wall. The bricks themselves were damp, blackened by mold. I could hear water trickling, though I didn't see a drain. A faint odor drifted up. Rusted metal, something coppery. My hand brushed against a wall, and my flashlight beam caught something. Red smears on the bricks, low enough to be at child height. They weren't dripping fresh, but they glistened in the light. I squatted, ran my glove over the smear. Sticky, crusted. It might have been paint. Could have been something worse. I traced the smears to a low door, rusted hinges, warped wood. Through the crack, I saw a narrow stairwell leading downward. Another breath, but this time closer, like someone exhaled right next to the door. I froze. Radioing for backup would alert whoever or whatever was down there. Maybe they still lingered below, waiting. I pushed the door open. It creaked, a long groan of protest. Rainwater trickled in from somewhere above, pooling at my feet. I pointed my flashlight into the darkness. The stairs descended 4 at a time, 3 tiers before they vanished into pitch black. I flicked on the light at my belt, a tiny strobe that cut through the void with rapid, jerky pulses. A word scratched on the wall in thick black paint. Never. Beneath it, someone had carved initials. M.R. I traced the letters with my thumb. The wood was soft, splintering under my touch. I turned the strobe back on the stairs. At the foot, a puddle reflected the flashing light. I saw movement in the water. Something thin and pale floating. I dropped down the last 4 steps in a single motion, boots hitting the concrete floor with a dull thud. I swept the beam across a cramped cellar. Old tools leaning against the walls. Shelves lined with jars of what looked like roots and cloudy liquid. In one corner, a child's tricycle lay on its side, wheel bent. Mud from outside coated its handles. I swallowed, heart thudding. The damp air made my boots squelch with each step. Then I heard it, static on my radio, short, like someone keyed the mic by accident. Someone was listening, maybe watching. The hair on my neck prickled. I called out, "Medic? Anyone?" My voice echoed back, swallowed by the cellar's walls. No reply, just another burst of static, closer this time. I edged toward the jars, reading faded labels. Chamomile, rue, belladonna. Folk remedies maybe, but the liquid in the belladonna jar looked dark, coagulated. I reached for a flashlight clip on my belt, but it caught on the strap of my holster. My gun shifted against my side. I paused. If I drew it down here, the muzzle flash would brighten every corner. Still, I needed to know if I was alone. I steeled myself and clicked off the flashlight strobe, plunging the room into darkness. My night vision camera, attached to my helmet, hummed softly. Through that lens, the world glowed emerald. I advanced. My footsteps were silent, but I heard breathing, deep, measured, half suppressed. It came from the far end of the room, beyond an overturned table. I circled the table, careful not to slip in the puddles. The breathing stopped when I got close. I clicked on a small pen light. The beam caught a form slumped against the wall. A woman, head bowed, hair damp and tangled. Her clothes were plastered to her skin from the rain, but her breathing was steady, a machine-like rasp. She lifted her head slowly, eyes wide, unfocused, reflecting the green glow of night vision. "Ma'am." My voice trembled more than I'd like. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She tried to stand, swayed, and a jar broke behind her. Shards clinked against the floor. She blinked, looked at me. Her eyes were the same gray as the sky that night. Then she whispered one word. "They..." Her eyes darted toward the stairs. I turned. The stairs were gone. In their place, a solid wall of brick matched the others. No door, no crack. Only the painted word "Never" and "MR" scrawled beneath. I backpedaled, stumbling over the woman's tricycle wheel. My radio exploded with voices calling me. Flashlights flicked on above, illuminating the cellar hatch. I bent down, reached for the woman's arm. Her skin was cold, clammy. I tried to pull her up, but she slumped again, whispering, "Help." Then silence. No heartbeat in my stethoscope, no breath, just the steady drip of water. I staggered back, nausea rising. Above me, footsteps pounded the hatch. I radioed dispatch. "Need immediate medical and homicide. I've got a..." Static swallowed the rest. They pulled me out. The tunnel was sealed within the hour. Detectives called it a hidden room, maybe from a renovation long ago. I didn't care. All I knew was that I'd heard her breathing twice now, first over the phone, then down here. I still don't know who she was or how she vanished from in front of me. That night, I kept seeing the initials carved into the wall. MR, I'm still not sure who that refers to, or why "they watch," was scrawled in child's handwriting. But I know one thing. I'll never forget her eyes, or the way that wall swallowed the stairs when I looked away. I stomped back into the station well past dawn, boots still squeezed full of mud and dread. The world outside was waking, birdsong cutting through the hum of streetlights shutting off. But inside those walls, everything felt more hollow than before. I dropped my raincoat over the edge of the desk and ran a hand through my hair. Coffee sat cold in a styrofoam cup, half forgotten. I picked it up, inhaled the acrid steam, and took a sip. My stomach lurched. Detectives buzzed around the evidence room, talking in low voices I couldn't catch. Forensics tucked away the note, the doll, the tricycle, everything labeled and bagged. They treated the house like a crime scene, but I still felt like the victim. I'd seen a woman die in that cellar, heard her breath, watched her slump, silent. I knew better than anyone that sometimes people vanish without a trace, and sometimes they reappear in ways you never want to explain. I stepped into the briefing room. Whiteboards still held yesterday's shift assignments. I left the crusted mugs for the janitor, sat at the long table, and stared at the thin stream of light curling through the blinds. I was supposed to fill out paperwork, hundreds of pages of reports, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. They shook so badly I couldn't hold a pen. I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails from dispatch checking in, and a text from Susan asking if I'd be home for dinner. I left it unanswered. A knock at the door. Lieutenant Ramirez slipped in, face drawn. He didn't bother with morning or how you doing. He just closed the door and looked at me. I heard you found something. His voice was flat. I gestured at the cup. Coffee's cold. He sank into the chair beside me. Tell me what happened. I ran through it again. The breathing on the line, the footprints, the doll's glass eye, the note that said, "They watch." I watched his expression. He frowned at the initials carved on that basement door, MR. He tapped a pen on the table. Huh. I looked out at the blinds. The sun was higher now, pale but climbing. She was alive when I found her, breathing, then gone before I could call the medics. Stairs just gone. My voice was rough, as if I'd swallowed broken glass. He sighed. No structural reports on that house. City archives say they added the basement back in '68. There shouldn't have been a cellar before. How'd it vanish back up? I shrugged, tasting bile. I don't know. He nodded. Detectives want you to come down to HQ, statement, follow up. They might have questions about your timeline. I rose. Timeline's clear. I got there at 2:13, in the yard 10 minutes later, down the cellar 30 minutes after that. By 3:30, the scene was sealed. He glanced at his watch. 0930. I choked out a laugh. Really pushes the urgency, huh? He stood. Look, I know it's unusual, but we need formality, and you need to sleep. I left him there and trudged back to my locker. The station buzzed with mid-morning activity. Officers grabbing donuts, cadets filing in for roll call. I slipped into the shower in the locker room, steam filling the stall, running hot water over my neck, trying to scrub the darkness from my skin. The water turned murky, brownish, and I slammed off the tap. My reflection in the fogged mirror stared back pale and hollow-eyed. By the time I was showered and changed, the pain in my jaw from clenching my teeth all night had eased to a dull ache. I forced myself to eat a pastry from the break room, sugar-coated, stale, but any taste was better than nothing. I stared at the ceiling above the table, and the tile grouted with age. At 9:30, I made my way to the chief's office. Detectives filled the room, 2 cameras on tripods, a table covered in notes and prints of photographs. The notes' jagged edges, the doll's cracked eye socket. A still of the woman's pallid face, captured on my helmet camera. Eyes glassy, mouth parted mid-whisper. My name was on a printed label stuck to the mic. Officer Mitchell. I sat. A detective slid a folder across. This is your personal report. Read it, then we'll ask you questions. I flipped through pages, narrative reports, evidence logs, forensics notes. Every step I'd taken was documented. Somewhere, between my report and their tape, facts could shift. I closed it. The lead detective, a lanky woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Officer Mitchell, is everything here accurate? I nodded. Yes. She clicked on a recorder. Describe exactly what you saw when you opened the basement door. I took a breath. closed my eyes to recall the darkness. The door was warped wood, no latch, swinging inward. Water dripped onto my boots. Stairs went down 3 tiers, then nothing. When I shined the strobe, I saw her, a woman sitting against the wall. When I looked away, the stairs had vanished, just a brick wall. She glanced at the prints. You said she whispered they then stopped. I rubbed my forehead. Yes. Another detective chimed in. Did you notice any cameras, security devices? No cameras, no wiring, no recordings. They pressed on. What happened to the note, to the doll, to the tricycle? I answered each question slowly, measured. My throat burned. I realized I was shaking again. They finished, thanked me, and told me to go home, get rest, stand by for further contact. I stepped into the hallway. Patrol cars idled outside. I felt emptier than ever. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for finding her. I stopped dead. Read it again. Thank you for finding her. No trace of sender, no number saved. I stared at it, heart thudding. Who was it? The victim's family? An obsessive stranger? My radio crackled. Officer Mitchell, Patch 4, assignment, domestic dispute at Pine and 3rd. I glanced toward the station door, sunlight pouring in. Part of me wanted to leave it all behind, throw my badge in the trash. But I was bound by duty, by habit, by the knowledge that people depended on me to show up. I typed a reply, "Who is this?" No response. I holstered my phone, pulled on my cap, walked out into the morning. The world looked too bright, the sky too blue. But I knew the darkness was there, just beyond sight, breathing through the walls, watching. And I kept moving. I headed back onto patrol at dusk. The sky bruised purple and gray as the sun gave up its last light. My cruiser's headlights cut lanes through the gathering fog, and I kept replaying that text. Thank you for finding her. I still didn't know who her was. If she'd been the woman in the cellar or someone else altogether. Wherever that message came from, it felt less like gratitude and more like a warning. The call came in quiet. Possible welfare check at 417 Oak Circle. Elderly resident, concerns from neighbor. I punched it into the console and steered down winding streets whose names I'd memorized long ago. Oak Circle was near the old mill, boarded-up storefronts giving way to neat bungalows fenced in by hedges. I pulled up, radio dispatch. On scene. I'll check on Mrs. Carter. The neighbor, a thin man in a sweatshirt, met me on the sidewalk. He looked as worn as the faded siding behind him. Officer, he said, voice low, I'm worried. Haven't seen her since morning. Mail's stacking up. He pointed at the driveway. No tire tracks in the gravel. Porch light flickered inside, but through the tinted windows I saw only the reflection of streetlights. I nodded. I'll knock. I raised my hand, rapped the door twice. Silence. I knocked again, still nothing. I checked my radio. Backup was tied up. I sighed, tried the doorknob, unlocked. I stepped inside. The house smelled of old perfume and mothballs. In the living room, furniture sat draped in plastic. A TV stood muted in the corner, its red standby light blinking. I paused at the threshold. Floorboards sighed underfoot. I clicked on my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. A rocking chair moved slowly, though no breeze stirred. I froze. I listened. Nothing but my own breath. I approached the chair. It creaked again, coming to rest at odd angles. On the seat lay a folded letter. I picked it up, addressed to Darcy, dated yesterday, no stamp. Inside, scrawled in ink that bled at the edges. They've come for you. Don't answer the door, no signature. My pulse spiked, another note, another warning. I shoved it into my breast pocket. Mrs. Carter's name rolled around my mind. Never met her, never knew her first name. I called out gently, "Ma'am? Mrs. Carter?" No reply. I moved through the house, checking rooms. In the kitchen, coffee sat cold, ground splattered on the counter. A cup in the sink, half full, smelled sour. The fridge hummed but was empty. I scanned each door, locked until I reached the back. Sliding glass door cracked open on its latch. Rain from earlier had steamed the panes. I shone my light outside. No footprints, just a garden overgrown with weeds. Something glinted on the patio table, a tarnished locket. I picked it up, flicked it open. Inside, 2 photographs. One of a young woman smiling in a sundress. Another of an elderly lady by the front porch, cane in hand. The inscription read, "MW and DR forever." I slipped it into my pocket and stepped back inside. Footsteps overhead, soft and slow. I raised my flashlight to the ceiling hatch in the hallway. It swayed slightly. I pulled out my radio, voice steady. "Dispatch. Possible person on 2nd floor. Proceeding with caution." No answer. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart pounding against bone. The hallway upstairs was narrow, wallpaper curling at the edges, stains marring the lower panels as if someone had scraped at the walls. Doors lined the corridor. I moved slowly, testing each knob. The first room, empty. Second room, twin beds, floral sheets, moth-eaten. On one bed lay a pair of slippers. Size small, worn thin, no sign of movement. At the end of the hall, the master bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open. Inside, the bed was unmade, pillows flopped to one side. On the dresser, a calendar marked with X's ending on yesterday's date. Each morning had been crossed, except today. A woman's voice, soft, wavering, drifted from the attached bathroom. I froze, flashlight beam quivering. I approached the bathroom door. The voice turned to sobbing. I knocked gently. "Mrs. Carter, it's Officer Mitchell. Are you okay?" No answer, just sniffles. I pushed the door open. The bathroom was pale in the flashlight's glare. White tile, bathtub half filled with cloudy water. A raincoat draped over the curve of the tub. Steam hissed from the faucet, though no knob was turned. I stepped closer. In the corner, curled against the wall, sat Mrs. Carter. Her shoulders heaved as she sobbed, arms wrapped around herself. She looked up, eyes red, wild, scanning the room. When she saw me, she froze. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped. "They said not to let you in." I crouched. "Who did, ma'am? Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Number. It's not that, it's them. They watch from the walls." She pointed. "You saw it, didn't you? The note I reached out. I found the note. Who wrote it?" She clenched her lips. "My daughter. Or the voice. I'm not sure anymore." She traced a finger along the tile lines. They carve in the steam at night." Her breath caught. I glanced at the fogged mirror, its surface rippling with condensation. I flicked off my flashlight and leaned in. Words scrawled there in dripping water. "Please help me." I recoiled, stomach lurching. The writing faded as steam dispersed. Mrs. Carter's grip on my arm tightened. "They promised to leave if I let them in for coffee." Her eyes filled with tears. "But after that, they never go away." I pressed a hand to her shoulder. "It's okay, you're safe now." She laughed, hollow, broken. "Safe? There's no safe." I lifted her gently and guided her out. The hallway light flickered, the bulb dimming in a single pulse. I led her down the stairs. She kept whispering, "Don't let them follow you." Outside, I radioed for EMS. The neighbor met us, eyes wide. I signed over care, then stepped back onto the porch. The windows glowed warm, the house solid behind its walls. Yet I half expected to see a face pressed against the glass, watching. I climbed back into the cruiser, heart still hammering. The road ahead was dark and winding. In my coat pocket, the locket and the note pressed against my ribs. I took a breath, feeling every pulse. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. In the fading light, the house stood silent, windows dark, porch light gone out. But for a moment I thought I saw a figure at the window, pale and still. Then the mist swallowed it whole. I swallowed hard and drove on. I drove on through empty streets, the cruiser's engine humming lower than my pulse. The sky was nearly black now, and the mist clung to the pavement like a second skin. Every stoplight I passed flickered out just as I approached, plunging intersections into hush. I felt their eyes on me, those unseen watchers from Willow Drive, Oak Circle, and the house on Maple Street. Their gaze was a constant weight, pressing through the glass and steel of my patrol car. I signaled right at Aberdeen Avenue, following the narrow turn toward the riverfront warehouses. A hang-up call had come in there once too, years ago. I remembered pulling up to an empty loading dock. A phone still warm against the cement floor, the caller long gone. The dispatcher's placid voice over the radio. No voice, just static and breathing. That night, I'd circled those warehouses for hours, tires squealing over broken glass, until dawn chased me away. They never found anyone. Never answered why the call was placed. It stayed with me, that quiet echo of a panic I couldn't trace. Now, I passed the old mill again, its windows boarded high, dark, and lifeless. The call on my radio crackled. "Officer Mitchell, we've got a 911 hang-up at 209 Pineway Road." Same pattern, line open, breathing. I flicked on the siren, low pulse, a warning, and steered toward Pineway, logic warring with instinct. Each new 911 hang-up felt like a puzzle piece from a box I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. Pineway Road was narrow, the asphalt scarred by years of tree roots pushing up from beneath. Houses there sat back from the street, obscured by hedges tall as men's heads. I parked halfway up the driveway of number 209, a two-story clapboard house painted appealing cream. No porch light, only the occasional drone of a street lamp buzzing somewhere beyond the trees. I grabbed my flashlight and radioed in, on scene. Investigating. My boot sank into wet grass as I walked toward the front porch. Steps were warped. Each creak sounded cavernous in the night. I raised my hand, knocked once, metal on wood, and waited. Rainwater dripped from the eaves in slow, measured beats. No answer. I tried the knob, unlocked. Inside, the house was cold. My flashlight beam caught motes of dust swirling in the yellow glow of a single overhead bulb. The living room was wide, wooden floors scarred with scuff marks. A sofa lay overturned, cushions shoved aside as though someone had dragged them in haste. I crouched, touching the fabric, damp with dew from my jacket. Footprints led from the doorway toward an open archway. I followed, each footstep echoing. The archway opened into the dining room. A long table sat under a chandelier, crystals missing, wires exposed like broken veins. On the table was a rotary phone, black, gleaming wetly in the flashlight's glare. The handset lay off the cradle. Fingerprints smudged the plastic. I clicked the off-hook button. Static hummed through the line, but no breathing. I spoke into the radio. Found a phone on the table, handset off the cradle, line dead. I set the phone down and crossed to the hallway. Doors fanned out on either side. I reached the first, bathroom. The fan hummed, though no switch was on. Tiles glistened. A single glove lay on the counter, latex, white and filthy. I lifted it once, then dropped it. Gut instinct told me it belonged to someone who didn't want to be identified. I passed the next door bedroom. Unmade bed sagged in the center, pillows crumpled. On the bed, two outlines pressed into the sheets as if two people had lain there a moment ago but vanished when observed directly. I remembered the cellar at Willow Drive, how the stairs had dissolved into brick when I wasn't looking. My skin prickled. I edged toward the master bedroom at the end of the hall. Its door was cracked, like an invitation. I pushed it open. The room was cavernous, a high ceiling lost in shadow. At its center, a mattress on the floor with no frame. Sheets littered the floor. On the headboard, carved into the wood, were letters N.W. beneath the word alone. I snapped a photo. Underneath, someone had drawn an arrow pointing toward the closet. I hesitated, then approached the closet door. It was ajar. I put my hand on the knob, cold, metal, and pulled it open. Inside, clothes hung on a rod, untouched by time. But at the back, taped to the wall, was a printed photograph, a family portrait. Mother, father, two children, standing in front of that very house. Their faces were pleasant, smiling in broad daylight. Someone had scrawled over their eyes with a black marker, thick lines blotting out identity. My radio crackled. Backup arriving. I exhaled, tension coiling in my shoulders. I clipped my flashlight to my belt and reached into the closet to remove the photo. My glove brushed something behind it. Another folded note. I unfolded carefully. You shouldn't have come. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Slow, measured, not human, not quite. The boards outside the closet settled under weight. My heart hit my ribs like a hammer. A breath came from behind me, soft, deliberate. I spun, hand on my sidearm. The hallway was empty, only the deep breathing. I backed into the closet, eyes darting. The breathing grew louder, closer. My skin crawled. I pressed against the wall, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The closet door began to close, swaying on its hinges. I lunged at it, yanking it open. Darkness spilled out into the room. I flicked my flashlight. No one there. The slatted wood floor bore muddy footprints, leading into the room, then stopping in perfect, clean circles. I fished out my radio. Dispatch, I need immediate backup. Possible intruder at 209 Pineway. Someone's in here with me. Static answered. My call didn't go through. The battery icon flashed red. I exhaled, shaking my head. Great. No radio, no comms, just me and that breathing. I clicked off the flashlight, plunging the closet into darkness. My night vision cam kicked in with a soft whir. Everything turned green. My breath fogged the lens. I saw movement. A shape at the far corner of the room, tall and thin, half hidden in shadow. I aimed the camera, heart in my throat. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. Then it whispered one word, so close I felt its breath against my neck. Leave. I didn't hesitate. I yanked open the closet door and ran down the hall, boots slipping on wood. I heard laughter behind me, tiny, childlike, twisted in amusement. I slammed into the living room, across the table, knocking the phone to the floor where it smashed. I didn't look back. I raced through the front door, rain lashing my face, and didn't stop until I was back in the cruiser, door locked. My radio crackled. Officer Mitchell, come in. I slapped the knob. I'm out. Pineway, house is compromised. No sign of occupant. Note said, you shouldn't have come. I saw My voice choked in my throat. The channel opened. What is it, Mitchell? I turned the key in the ignition. The engine barked. I took one last look at the house. Dark windows glowing with malice. I left without waiting for backup. The windshield wipers carved arcs through the mist. My pulse was so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't call it in again, I just drove, faster than I knew was safe, away from that house, that breathing, that shape that told me to leave. The road blurred. Streetlights winked out behind me. In the pocket of my jacket, the photograph and the note pressed cold against my ribs. I stared at the rearview mirror. In the green glow, I thought I saw eyes. No, two hollow voids gazing back at me. Then the road opened ahead, and I let the cruiser carry me into the night. I pulled into the driveway of my house just past midnight. Headlights carving arcs through the oaks that cast skeletal shadows over the yard. The engine hummed a low goodbye, and for a moment I just sat, seat warm, night pressing against the glass like a living thing. Behind me, the road stretched empty, vanishing into darkness. Ahead, my front door waited. I reached into my pocket, felt the soft plastic of the locket, the folded edge of the note. A chill crawled up my spine as I unbuckled my seatbelt, the silence inside the cruiser deeper than any station at 4 a.m. I gathered my keys and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under my weight, each groan a reminder that this house, like every other, was built by hands that can't foresee what will live in the cracks. I brushed rain from my shoulders and fitted the key into the lock. It turned, and the door swung open on its hinges. Welcome or trap, I wasn't sure which. I sank inside, closing the door softly behind me. No radio, no cruiser to return to, just the low hum of the heater and the faint pulse of my own heartbeat. Inside, the hallway light flickered once, then steadied. The living room was a coffin of shadows. I dropped my raincoat over the back of a chair and set the locket and note on the coffee table, next to the cold cup of coffee I'd forgotten this afternoon. I flipped open the locket. The photos of mother and daughter stared back, eyes crossed out with harsh strokes. The initials, M, W, and DR, bore down on me. I traced the engraving with a fingertip and closed it, wondering if those two women had known this dread. I moved to the window and looked out at the dark yard. The mist had thickened, curling around the porch rail like fingers reaching. I shook it off and walked to the kitchen to pour myself a fresh coffee. The microwave chimed as I heated water, steam rising in swirls around the dim light. My hands trembled, but I forced them steady. I heard nothing but the drip of the faucet and the mug setting on the counter. I inhaled the steam and felt my stomach knot. A soft buzz came from the hallway. My phone, on the charger, lit up with an unknown number, 911. My heart stuttered. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered, torn between instinct and fear. I answered. Silence, heavy as the air in those abandoned houses. Then, breathing, shallow, deliberate. Not ragged like the first night, but steady, calm. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? The line crackled. A soft click, and then a woman's voice so quiet I almost doubted it was real. I never left. I dropped the phone, coffee sloshing at the rim. I fumbled to answer again. The line was already dead. My knuckles whitened around the handset. I thought of the whisper in the closet. Leave. And of Mrs. Carter's voice, they watch from the walls. And of the woman in the cellar, whose life I couldn't save, who might still be out there, or might be here now in my own home. A floorboard cracked upstairs. I froze mid-sip. The mug tipped, spilling hot liquid across the counter. I set it down and looked at the stairs leading to the bedrooms. Upstairs, the dark was thicker. My cruiser's headlights would have faded by now. No backup, no evidence markers, no bright spotlights to banish it. Just me, alone with the breathing in my ear. I could feel its presence, as if something moved behind the walls just out of sight. I crept toward the stairwell, flashlight in hand. Each step groaned underfoot, sending small echoes into the empty house. My pulse thumped a warning. At the top, the hallway stretched away, doors shut like watchful sentinels. I shone my light on them one by one. Bathroom, no light, no movement. Bedroom, shadows pooling in the corners. My daughter's room, door closed. Pink, glow-in-the-dark stars scattered on the ceiling, silent. I exhaled, but felt air catch in my throat. Then I heard it, a whisper through the door at the end of the hall. I spun, flashlight beam dancing on the handle. The whisper, so faint again. "Open!" It wasn't Susan. She was away, not my partner. So who was calling me by my name, in my own house? I pressed my ear to the door. The whisper slid through the wood, an invitation or a threat. "Come." My glove brushed cold door metal. My training told me not to open unknown rooms, not to approach the sound. But my gut twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. I twisted the knob. It clicked. The door swung inward. Inside was empty. Walls bare, floor smooth. But across the far wall, traceries scarred the paint, similar to the scratched words I'd seen before. The letters writhed in the flashlight's beam. U, R, next. Beneath them, initials carved, MR, and just a slash, incomplete. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun in panic, yanking at the handle, locked. My flashlight bobbled in my grip. Then the breathing started again, from somewhere in the room, soft and close. My breath caught. I swung the light around. The corner by the closet remained shadowed. I edged toward it, every nerve screaming. There, leaning in the dark, hunched on the floor, was a woman's silhouette, hair spilling forward. She looked like a block of shadow come to life. No face, just the outline of a body. Behind her, the initials MR glowed in scratch marks, as if illuminated by unseen headlights. I swallowed, voice gone. I raised the flashlight. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were pale voids, blank yet fathomless, reflecting the beam like twin beacons. She tilted her head just slightly as if studying me. Then she whispered, voice raw, "I told you to leave." Her words hung in the air, a curse and a promise. My fingers found the knob. I yanked. The door burst open, jolting me into the hallway. The whisper followed, faint now, drifting behind me. "You can't run." I sprinted down the hall, tripping over slippers, nearly sliding on the wooden floor. I threw myself down the stairs 2 at a time, adrenaline tearing through me. The front door was ahead, within reach. I slammed through it, stumbling onto the porch, gulping cold air. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. I jammed the key in and twisted until the lock engaged. Rain slicked the porch. I turned, expecting to see the shape at the window, but the glass was dark and empty. Only my reflection stared back. Eyes wild, ragged breath visible in the night. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again, 911. I held it in my hand, trembling. I looked up at the house. Roof and chimney, windows dark, the breath of mist weaving through the trees. I remembered the first call, the last call, every silent 911 that had sent me running into someone else's nightmare. Now it was mine. The phone in my hand glowed with the word answer shining like a dare. I swallowed. I lifted it to my ear, a pause, static. And then that same intimately familiar breathing, close enough that I could feel the exhalation on my cheek. I pressed the phone to my ear, voice whispering, "Who is this?" The static drummed. A gentle click. The line went dead. I stood on the porch, heart pounding, drenched in rain and dread, listening. No sound but the drip from the eaves, the soft sigh of the wind. And then, as clear as if she stood beside me, the whispered words, "I'm already inside." And I realized I wasn't alone. I stood on the porch, phone pressed to my ear, fingers slick in the rain, heart pounding so loud it felt like the world would hear it. The line crackled once, a pause that stretched out until every second felt like an hour, and then came that breathing again, steady, measured, impossibly close. Not through the phone, but in the air around me. I let the phone drop, watching it fall into a puddle where the screen flickered under murky water. I didn't move. I didn't dare. The house behind me stood silent, every window dark except for those ghastly stars in my daughter's room, still faintly glowing. My mind raced back through every call I'd ever answered, every hang-up with nothing but breath on the line. Tonight, all of them converged. Willow Drive, the old cellar, Mrs. Carter sobbing in shadows, the family portrait with children's eyes gouged out, the closet at Pineway. And now here, my own home, turning against me. Footsteps sounded behind me on the wooden porch, soft, tentative. I tensed, listening. I'd locked the door, but locks don't stop sounds. I grabbed the closest thing, a chair, and swung it around, ready to strike. The footsteps paused. Then, slow and deliberate, came a tap at the front window, right where the living room light should have been on, but wasn't. I edged sideways, peering through the raindrops on the glass. Nothing. Only my reflection, wide-eyed, mouth parted. A crack ran through the pane, as if struck by something heavy. I realized I was bleeding, a thin trickle from where I jammed my knuckle against the chair. I licked a drop of rain-soaked blood from my thumb and swallowed hard. I tried to steady my breath, but every inhale felt ragged, shallow, like the very breath in the air was trying to choke me. Behind me, the door to the study creaked open. I pivoted, chair raised. The room was dark, lined with shelves of old case files I'd collected over the years. Unsolved disappearances, weird hang-ups, the ones dismissed as prank calls or equipment malfunctions. I'd thrown those files against a wall after noisy nights, locked them away to forget them. Now they sat waiting, papers yellowed, edges curled, as if expecting an audience. I forced myself to set the chair down. I climbed the single step into the study, each footfall sounding like a drumbeat. The door shut behind me with a hushed click. My flashlight lay on the floor near the chair. I picked it up and clicked it on. The beam landed on a file open on my desk. Case 541, Harlan Road, Hang Up. That was mine, from 10 years ago. I'd responded to a barbed wire fence surrounding an abandoned farmhouse. Nothing there. Just breath on the line and the dial tone when I hung up. No body, no owner, nothing. I shook my head. I flipped the file closed and heard a wet thump behind me. I spun. From the doorway leading to the hallway, a dark figure slumped to the floor. My cruiser's raincoat discarded, soaking. No shoulders, just empty sleeves. My heart seized. I crossed slowly, breathing shallow, and picked up the coat. In the pocket was the single white glove, the one I'd found at Mrs. Carter's. I stared at it. Why was it here? I heard breathing again, inside the pocket. I froze, the glove dangling. The breath quickened, a half-choked gasp. I felt it against my skin, tactile, like someone pressing their mouth to my forearm. I dropped the glove and backed away, stumbling over a pile of case files. They fanned out across the floor. Reports of the cellar woman, the children's tricycle, the words, "Help me," scratched on mirrors. They whispered under my boots as I turned. The breathing came from behind the bookcase. One of the shelves had swung open slightly, revealing a narrow gap. I approached, light trembling in my hand. The gap was just wide enough to slip through. I knew I shouldn't. Chasing sounds in the old house had nearly cost me everything. But I couldn't leave it. Not tonight. I wedged my shoulder into the shelf. It swung, pivoting on hidden hinges, revealing a hidden chamber carved into the old plaster. I clicked off the flashlight and the room went dark, but for the faint glow of those glow-in-the-dark stars leaking under the door from the hallway. I advanced. The smell hit me first, damp earth, rot, antiseptic. Then I saw the breathing source, a small cot pushed against the far wall. On it lay a woman, in her 30s, pale as moonlight, wrapping her arms around herself. Her face was hidden in her hair. I raised a hand, voice hushed. "Ma'am." No movement. I clicked the flashlight back on and stepped forward. The beam swept across her, and I saw the glint of tears on her cheek. I knelt beside her. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here to help." She lifted her head. Her eyes, those same pale voids, stared at me without seeing. I reached out. Her skin was ice cold. Then a rasping whisper came from behind me, close enough to tickle my ear. "You found her." I spun. No one. Just the empty chamber and a second woman standing behind the first, black dress draped to the floor. Her lips parted in a smile that never reached her eyes. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The two of them stepped forward in unison. The first lifted a hand, slender fingers flicking the flashlight from my grip. It clattered to the ground and rolled away, plunging us into near-complete darkness. I squinted, trying to make them out. The second woman, taller, tilted her head, silhouette soft as smoke. The first whispered, voice eerily familiar. "We waited so long." My radio buzzed in my pocket. Instinct had kept it there. I fumbled it out and pressed the button. "Dispatch, can you hear me?" Only static answered. I dropped it. They closed in. I backpedaled, chest tight. A shaft of pale light cut in from the cracks around the door. A patrol flashlight confirming backup had arrived. I exhaled, relief crashing over me. Or so I thought. I rushed toward the light, arms outstretched, stumbling. But the chamber did not end in a door. It ended in a brick wall, the same plaster I'd broken through. The light slices danced across the bricks, illuminating carved words, "You never left." Beneath, initials again, MR and DR, the letters neatly inscribed. I pounded on the wall. "Help, let me out." My voice echoed, then drowned in silence. The two women stood unmoved. The one on the cot opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. The taller one bent forward, hand reaching toward me. Her fingertips brushed my cheek. Cold, a whisper of pain. Then she sighed. The walls began to close in. The chamber shrank, the ceiling dropping, the air pressing against my lungs. I clawed at the bricks, nails scraping. The cot sank into the floor. The woman curled tighter, eyes where mine had been. The taller woman leaned in, breath hot and foul, and whispered one final line. "We came home." I screamed, a ragged roar that shook the chamber. Bricks ground together behind my back, dust falling in motes. My vision blurred, my lungs burned, and then, all at once, the crushing pressure stopped. Darkness swallowed the space. I woke on the floor of my living room. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains. My head throbbed. I sat up, dazed. The hidden study door was gone from the wall, just a patch of mismatched plaster. My daughter's stars were dark. The locket and note lay on the coffee table, untouched. My phone lay beside them, battery dead, screen cracked. I frowned. On my desk, a new file lay open. Case 001. They never found them. My name was scrawled at the top, Officer Mitchell. Beneath, two photographs, the cellar woman and the woman from the cot. Under each, a date, today's date. My chest tightened as the recognition set in. I sank to the floor, staring at the file. The final words at the bottom, "Welcome home." And I realized I had never left. I never heard anyone else pull into my driveway that morning. No sirens, no backup, no footsteps in the hall. Just the soft hiss of the heater clicking off and the dull thud of my own heart slowing inside my chest. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor beside the desk where I'd collapsed. The file, my file, was still open at case 001. The papers beneath it trembled as if a breeze had passed, though every window remained shut tight. I pushed myself up and felt the rough grain of the hardwood beneath my palms. My reflection in the darkened TV screen was hollow, eyes dull, uniform gray. I reached for the file. The photographs inside were the women I'd found lurking in my nightmares. The cellar woman and the cot woman. Beneath each photo was scrawled a date that matched today's date, my date of duty. In red ink, someone had written a single word across the bottom of both images. Home. My breath caught. I closed the folder, but the words stayed burned in my mind. I slipped to my feet and walked toward the couch, the locket and folded notes still lying there from the night before. The locket's clasp clicked open in my hand, revealing MW and DR staring back through the scratched-out eyes. A tremor ran through me when I remembered the initials carved into that hidden chamber, MR and DR. The second set of initials was mine, Mitchell, Robert. But the first, the woman beside me in that chamber, the one who whispered, "We came home," bore my daughter's name, DR, Darcy Ruth. I caught my breath. The note lay folded again, as though someone had smoothed it back into shape. I opened it one last time. In familiar scrawl, 4 words, "You never left me." The room felt too small, as if the walls themselves tightened around my shoulders. My radio crackled in the kitchen, on, though I'd turned it off hours ago. I crossed the room, each step weighted. The radio emitted static, then a low whisper, "Come back." I froze. The whisper was my own voice, warped and distant. My pulse echoed in my ears. Through the static, I heard something else. Another breath. Gentle and living, but impossibly faint. I followed the sound into the hallway. At my feet lay my daughter's small sneaker, muddy and worn exactly like the trailer park shoe I'd found at Willow Drive. My throat seized. Darcy had been away at her mother's for spring break. How did her shoe appear here? I knelt and picked it up. The insoles bore tiny scrawls in pencil. "Daddy, don't leave." My vision blurred. I dropped the shoe and backed into the living room. The front door stood open, unlocked. Outside, the morning light was gray and still, thick mist curling across the lawn. I didn't remember opening it. The phone in my hand buzzed. An incoming call, unknown. I swiped to answer. Silence. Then the softest whisper, "I'm home." I dropped the phone and stumbled backward, chest heaving. The files on the coffee table fluttered as if caught in a breeze. The living room light flickered overhead. Then I heard footsteps, tiny and deliberate, behind me. I turned quickly. My daughter stood at the top of the stairs, face pale beneath the glow-in-the-dark stars. Her eyes were those same voids I'd seen before, empty, reflective. She wore her raincoat, zipped tight, boots muddy as if she'd walked through the night. She didn't speak, she just stared. I swallowed, voice cracking. "Darcy?" No answer. I took a step forward. She raised a hand, pointing toward the study door. Her lips parted in a whisper I could barely catch. "We're together." My knees buckled. The room spun. I reached out, but she didn't move. Instead, she sank back into the hallway shadow, disappearing behind the banister. My heart thundered. I heard the study door creak open, slowly, inevitably, though I knew I had sealed it yesterday. A chill rushed through the house as if the air itself were inhaling. Then, silence. I stood alone in the gray morning light. The mist pressed against the windows. No laughter, no footsteps, no cries. The only evidence of her existence was that single, muddy shoe at my feet, and the echo of her whisper in my mind. I thought I saw her reflection one last time in the dark screen of the TV, standing beside me, but when I turned, the room was empty. And I realized that in chasing them into the dark, I had never really come home. Who could say where my daughter is now, or where I truly stand? All I know is this house, my mind, and my life are no longer mine alone. I am never leaving again, or they never will. It was just past 2 a.m. when the call came in. I was leaning back in the driver's seat, the heater humming low, windows fogged from my breath, when the radio crackled. Unit 5, possible hang-up call. No voice. Pings at 213 Willow Creek Drive. Repeat, no voice. I eased the mic away from my mouth. Copy that, dispatch. My partner, Torres, sitting shotgun, gave me a tired look over the dashboard lights. His eyelids drooped. He was 2 cups of coffee shy of alert. Another one? He muttered, voice gravel thick. Too many this week, I said. I tapped the cruiser's console, punching in the address. Willow Creek was the kind of subdivision that used to boast white picket fences. Now, half the lawns were overgrown, street lamps sputtering on rusted poles. We rolled down the road, tire treads humming on wet asphalt. Rain had tapered off, just enough drizzle to make the street gleam like a dark mirror. The trees arched overhead, their branches brushing against each other like fingernails. Sounds like a prank, Torres said. He glanced at the radio scanner, then back at me. His tone was casual, but I could hear the tension beneath. He was an old hand, 5 years on the force, and he knew better than to shrug off a silent 911. I nodded. Someone's in trouble. Could be a kid too scared to talk, or worse. My voice was low enough that even I had to listen closely. That's how these things start. Quiet and unassuming, until you're standing in the middle of something you can't explain. The GPS croaked a final turn, a narrow cul-de-sac with 4 houses, each dark as tombstones. Number 213 sat at the end, porch light flickering once, twice, then off. No traffic, no neighbor cars, just the soft hiss of recirculated radio static. I killed the engine. The cruiser fell silent except for the receiver's hum. I opened the door. Cold air hit me like a wall. I stepped onto damp grass, boots sinking slightly in the soft earth. Torres followed. He snapped on his flashlight and aimed it at the front window. No glow inside. Let's keep it tight, I said, voice clipped. Approach together, doors first. Torres moved to stand beside me. We advanced on the front door. No screen, just a painted wood slab with a brass knob. I rapped 3 times, loud, deliberate. Police? 911 call? Everyone okay in there? Silence. My breath caught. I knocked again, harder. Footsteps, soft, step, moved just inside. My hand dropped to the holster. Torres, I whispered. Did you hear that? He nodded, flashlight trained on the crack under the door. A faint glow, just a sliver, pitched the hallway in a pale half-light. I twisted the knob. It turned, unlocked. We entered. The floor was linoleum, cold and sticky under our boots. I swept the light across the foyer, family photos on a side table, frames tipped over, glass glittering like small shards of ice. Check for movement, I said, voice barely above the growl of the heater. Torres peeled off to the right. I went left down a short hall. The air smelled musty, like a closed room left to rot. My light caught on overturned furniture. A chair on its side, magazines scattered, one page torn out. No sound but my own breathing. I reached what looked like a living room. Sofa cushions slumped as if someone had bolted from the chair. A coffee table held a mug, half full of cold, stale liquid. I flashed the beam upward, ceiling fan blades spinning slowly in the dim nightlight. I crouched and tapped the mug. It rocked but didn't spill. The surface was still. Footsteps behind me. I spun, flashlight jerking. Torres stood at the doorway, mouth half open. He pointed toward the window, tarped shut, yet shredded in one corner. Rainwater dripped through, forming a small puddle on the carpet. I swallowed hard. Windows cut. I checked the sash, several inches open. Someone was here. Torres keyed his mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 5. We have forced entry signs at 213. No visual on any victim or suspect." Static crackled. "Copy, Unit 5. Backup en route." I shone my light at the far wall. Spotted a low table with a phone off the hook. Cord curled like a snake. No dial tone. I picked it up and clicked it back into place. The line pinged, still open. I tapped the radio again. "Dispatch, terminate line." They complied. Silence returned. I moved toward the kitchen at the back. Floorboards creaked. A shadow flitted past the doorway, quick, low to the ground. A child? I froze. The figure vanished. Torres joined me by the sink. "Someone in here," he said, voice tight. "No family." We hit the hallway, through a cracked door. Master bedroom. Bed made, sheet smooth, then a smear of something dark along the footboard. Like paint, but too thick, too deliberate. My heart thumped in my throat. I knelt and touched it. Sticky, cold. I flicked a corner with my gloved finger, deep red. I sucked in a breath. Blood. Before Torres could reply, something slammed in the next room, a bathroom door closing. We both jumped. My flashlight beam darted toward the sound. The door trembled, then rattled as if someone was pushing from the inside. "Open up!" Torres barked. Silence. Then a whisper, faint. "Help!" My chest tightened. If this was a kid, they were in trouble. If it was someone else... I tightened my grip on the light. I tried the handle. Locked. "Ram, lock," I said. I grabbed my radio, Unit 5 requesting breaching tool. Moments passed. The rattle stopped. I banged on the door. "Please, we're police. If there's someone in there, answer us." No response. Only the flood of my own breath. My eardrums felt full. Ramirez joined me at the door. He lifted his flashlight over my shoulder. We exchanged a look. Same fear, same resolve. With one swift shoulder, I rammed the door. It groaned, then gave. We surged inside. The room was empty. White tile floor, a sink cabinet, shower curtain drawn. Wet footprints led from the tub, across the tiles into darkness. My light caught on something by the wall. A small figure huddled, knees tucked to chest, back to us. "Police!" I whispered, voice cracking. The figure didn't move. My light revealed pale skin, eyes closed. I knelt, reached out. No breathing. I flipped it over. A doll. My hand stilled. It wore a raincoat identical to one I'd seen on a missing child poster months ago. Silence stretched. Then the doll's head turned, slowly, eyes painted red, glinting in my beam. I jumped back, heart in my throat. A child's laughter echoed from somewhere upstairs, soft but manic, cutting through the quiet like a blade. I radioed for backup again, voice unsteady. "Dispatch, we have unidentified child sounds on the upper floor. Please hurry." As I climbed the stairs, every nerve screamed. I thought of my own daughter, sleeping safe miles away. We reached the landing, The laughter stopped. I raised my light. Down the hallway, bedroom doors lined up like dark teeth. At the end, the door was cracked, warmth spilling out in a dull orange glow. My hand rested on my holster. My partner's breath was close behind. I murmured, "On 3." I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No child, no furniture, just the low hum of an old heater. Then a soft click behind us, the front door slamming shut. In that instant, I knew we weren't alone. I turned toward the sound and froze. A small handprint bloomed on the window glass, right where the latch had been. And then, silence again. I don't know which scared me more, the emptiness of that room, or the certainty that someone, or something, was waiting beyond the glass. It was minutes later, maybe 10, though time blurred in that house, when the backup arrived. I heard their engines through the open window, headlights carving light into the hallway. But in that moment, all I felt was the press of chest against my spine, the beat of my pulse so loud it drowned out everything else. I turned back to the bedroom window where that small handprint lingered, smeared and half rained away. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Behind me, Torres was on the radio, summarizing our situation. I caught fragments. No sign of a child or suspect. Forced entry, possible staged scene. I swallowed, voice hoarse. Get a K9 on the perimeter. Sniff out anyone who slipped away. Outside the window, a ripple of movement, a flicker in the bushes. My heart leapt. I ducked, training the beam through the glass. Nothing. But then, from the darkness beyond, a child's face appeared for a heartbeat, pale, eyes wide, lips pressed together, then gone. I slammed into the glass, breath fogging the pain. "Hey, come out!" My shout echoed through the empty street beyond. The backup cruisers cast long shadows against the trailer walls. Radio static. "Lieutenant," Torres said beside me, keeping low. "Command wants an evac. No one in here until we clear it." I exhaled, forcing calm. Understood. But I didn't step away, not yet. My legs felt rooted to the floor. Something in that room was alive, something I couldn't see. Torres touched my arm. "We need the perimeter secured first." He jerked his head toward the bedroom door, still cracked. That thing might be in there. I nodded and moved toward the door again. Each step was measured, my flashlight carving a swath of light through the gloom. On the carpet lay scattered toys, a broken action figure, a plastic truck missing an axle, a puzzle piece painted red on one edge. No rhyme or reason, unless it was a message. I crouched to inspect the puzzle piece. It was heavy in my hand, weighty like it meant something more than mere debris. I turned it over. On the back, scratch marks. I thought I recognized the pattern, like a child scrawled in a panic. But I couldn't make sense of it in the wavering beam. The bedroom door creaked. I straightened, hand at the doorframe. "Torres?" I called. His reply was a whisper. "Down the hall." I'm checking the next room. His flashlight swept past me and vanished into darkness. I took another step and caught a glimpse. Something crouched behind the dresser, shifting. I jerked my beam toward it. Nothing. But the air changed, grew colder despite the heater humming somewhere deep in the house. My radio spat static. "Unit 5, Lieutenant. Perimeter is secured. All K9 teams in place." I tapped the mic. "Roger that, send them in." Footsteps approached outside, on the other side of the window. I trained my light there, no silhouette, but the bushes rustled again. The dog handler's voice, "K9 Team 3, ready." Then a low bark. The dog's nails tapped concrete, then silence. I turned back inside. The puzzle piece warmed in my palm. I slipped it into my pocket as I approached the dresser. footsteps echoing behind me. As I cleared it, the drawers were empty. Not a sock, not a shirt, just dust. Yet the carpet beneath was clean, almost polished, as if someone stepped there constantly. Ahead, the closet door stood slightly ajar. The gap was narrow, but I caught the gleam of metal. Knife? I swallowed hard. I knew this scene. Someone lured me in, stage-managed my every move. My breath clouded before me. I reached the closet. My gloved fingers wrapped the handle. One firm pull. The door swung inward, empty. Hangers swinging on the rod, one missing. My heart sank. A second missing. I counted them slowly. 5 empty hangers. One of them used for coats, but gone now. A whisper of movement behind me. I spun. Torres was there, eyes wide. He pointed behind me, to the open doorway where the child's laughter had bounced off the walls earlier. Now, the hallway was dark, but at the far end, something shifted. I swallowed. "Rabbit?" Torres said, using our code. "Suspect is mobile." I flicked on my radio. "All units, suspect is loose inside. Proceed with caution." Static crackled. "Copy." Torres' hand closed on my shoulder. "We need to clear out. This is bigger than a simple call." I nodded and moved to the door, but paused. The sound of soft breathing filled the room, so close it felt at my ear. I turned slowly. Nothing. But on the floor, at the base of the closet, lay a single child's shoe. Yellow, scuffed, Velcro strap undone. My mind flashed to missing child reports last month. A 9-year-old girl, vanished without a trace. Her shoe found in these same woods. I crouched. My flashlight revealed scuff marks on the wooden floor, leading out of the closet and down the hallway toward the master bathroom. The same bathroom where we'd found that doll earlier. I whispered, "Torres, look at this." He crouched beside me, his face paled. That's her shoe." Footsteps thundered on the stairs outside. The K-9 team moving in. I knew they'd find footprints. Maybe drop the lead on a scent. Maybe flush out whoever's hiding. But I also knew, even if we caught someone tonight, we wouldn't know the whole truth. I stood, voice steady despite the fear knotting my gut. "Let's move." As we left the bedroom, the atmosphere changed. The stale mustiness giving way to something metallic, like anticipation. The hallway seemed longer now. Endless. Doors lining each side, shadows pooling beneath them. My flashlight beam quivered as I approached the bathroom door. Torres gripped his weapon tighter. On 3, we kicked it open. Inside, steam billowed from the shower. The curtain closed. A pair of tiny footprints marked the tile floor. They ended at the door, not a single print beyond. I cursed low, radioing for the entry team. Unit 5, possible juvenile suspect. Last seen heading down the hall, proceed room to room. Behind us, the K-9 team's barks grew loud. But in that house, their excited snarls sounded off-key, an animal sensing prey where none remained. I exhaled. The shoe in my coat pocket felt like a tombstone. I stared at the footprints, at the steam rising and twisting under the light. Then silence, because she wasn't there. And I knew, no matter how many dogs, how many officers, we'd never shake the feeling that something was watching from those darkened rooms. Something human, or maybe just the echo of a child's desperate plea, left unanswered. The laughter returned, soft and close, right behind me. I spun. Empty hallway. Only the echoes of her voice, carrying a promise we couldn't keep. It was nearly dawn by the time the search team's flashlights carved rigid beams through the gray gloom of Willow Creek's interiors. I stood at the threshold of the hallway, rainwater dripping from my coat onto worn carpet, my boots heavy against the floorboard seams. Behind me, Torres and two uniformed officers fanned out, systematically prompting every room to clear. But those footprints and that single yellow shoe, found and left behind, were enough to tell me we were chasing ghosts. Every breath felt thick, as though the stale air in that house had congealed overnight. I could still taste the metallic tang of fear, mixed with cheap carpet cleaner and the faint scent of something floral, like a child's shampoo. The hallway doors, 6 on either side, loomed like sentinels, each one a question mark. Beyond them lay bedrooms, closets, bathrooms. Every intimate space turned alien. "Lieutenant," one of the fresh officers whispered, voice low. He shone his light under the third door on the left. "Nothing but—" He trailed off, tilting his head. His beam shook across the floor, and there, scrawled in red on the baseboard, were 2 letters. H-E. The paint looked fresh, bleeding onto the wood grain. Beneath it, faint streaks, finger smudges, led back toward the center of the hall. I inhaled. "Draw the line," I ordered. "From here out, no one steps past except me." My mouth was dry. I tried to swallow, but it felt like sand in my throat. The officers froze in place, shock writing their eyes. They'd seen it too, the whispered plea, so minimal that it might have meant anything. He, as in someone's name, or help, without the last 2 letters. Either way, still unresolved. Torres slid alongside me, crouching to inspect the smudges. His flashlight caught the sheen of moisture. "Lab will want to dust," he said. We both knew the rest would find prints, maybe DNA. But that only answered what happened here, not why or who. I nodded. "Secure that for evidence." I stood and pivoted toward the far end of the hall, where the master suite door, still ajar, beckoned with that dull orange glow. My heartbeat had settled into a slow drum, each beat a reminder that I was still breathing, still alive, still needed here. We advanced. The master bedroom was cavernous compared to the other rooms. A king-size bed pushed, flush against the opposite wall, windows curtained with heavy drapes, drawn as if to keep the world out. My flashlight skittered over an ornate dresser, its mirror cracked in 3 places, fractures running like lightning through glass. The bedspread was mangled, sheets tangled, mattress depressed in one corner where someone, or something, had knelt. A framed family portrait lay face down in the carpet beside the bed. I bent and picked it up. The faces were intact, smiling parents, a daughter no older than 6. But someone had scraped red into the glass at the bottom. Another word, home. The letters were shaky, hands perhaps not fully formed, the child's handwriting. But they were too neat, deliberate, weighted with intention. "Torres," I murmured, "look at this." He crouched next to me. His light traced the glass, his jaw clenched. "She's everywhere," he said, voice flat. "Or someone's framing her." I slid the photo back onto the carpet gently. My mind sifted through every missing child case that had passed through this precinct in the last decade. None fit perfectly. No female, 6 years old, named whatever the girl's name was, matching the photograph. Either it was old, from a previous generation, or an elaborate fabrication. Couldn't trust it. A sudden knock at the door broke the silence, sharp, deliberate. All 3 of us froze. The rapping came again, once, twice, then a firm pause, and a soft voice. "Lieutenant? Are you in there?" It was the canine handler, his tone professional, but the edge in his voice gave him away. He'd found something. I called back, doors unlocked. "Come in." The handler, Sergeant Mills, slipped inside with canine off-leash. His German Shepherd, Rex, nose to the ground, methodically circled the bed, pausing as if listening. Rex's ears flattened, He barked once, short, urgent, then bolted out the door. "Rex?" Mills called, chasing after him. "Rex, come back." I didn't hesitate. I jogged past them into the hallway. Where the hallway originally felt long and suspended, now it contracted, walls pressing inward. Rex waited at the end, low growl rumbling in his throat, nostrils flaring. I caught sight of something on the floor by the junction. A fragment of fabric, purple with gold flecks. I picked it up. It was velvety, like the lining of a child's costume. My mind raced. Princess dress? Halloween? Something worn only briefly but cherished. Blood? Number clean, but soaked with perfume. Faint but unmistakable. Lavender and something spicy. Rex tugged at the fabric, whining, then darted into the last room on the right. I followed, opening the door to find nothing. Empty, except for a rocking horse perched in the corner, the seat worn smooth. A bit of frayed hair caught on the mane, blonde, silky. The horse rocks gently back and forth, though there is no breeze. I inhaled sharply. Footsteps padded behind me. Torres stood in the doorway, hand on his holster. "Lieutenant, this place," he said. "It's a shrine, a monument. Someone's worshiping this kid or torturing us with her memory." His words hit home. Everything in this house was arranged to provoke us. The doll, the shoe, the portrait, the blood smear, the letters on the baseboards. It was personal, it was sadistic, and it was far from over. Beyond the rocking horse sat a wicker basket. I knelt and peered inside. Folded neatly were 6 items: the yellow shoe, the doll's raincoat, the puzzle piece, the photo, the block of red crayon, and a battered teddy bear missing an arm. Each placed like an offering. Each item retrieved from the house itself, or left here deliberately as bait. My radio crackled. "Lieutenant, command to Unit 5, confirm status." I tapped the mic. "Unit 5, currently assessing evidence. Kid or suspect is still not located. Recommend SWAT team." A soft creak interrupted me. The wardrobe door on the opposite wall swinging open a fraction more. I turned, flashlight aimed. Inside were coats. Children's coats hanging side by side in neat rows, each a different color. Red, yellow, blue, green. All pristine, untouched. Except one, a lavender coat, missing from the hanger. The hacking rasp came then. The noise of fingernails dragging across wood, low and jagged. It came from the attic hatch in the ceiling above the wardrobe. The same hatch we checked earlier and dismissed as empty. Now it rattled and quivered, as if someone was climbing down a ladder, descending. I swallowed, voice steady despite the surge of panic. "Everyone out," I ordered quietly. Slow and calm, we secure the house, lock it down, wait for the SWAT. But as I turned to lead, the hatch burst open and turquoise lamplight spilled down a ladder. I saw the outline of a small figure, descending carefully but with purpose. Tiny boots on each rung. My heart thundered. I raised my flashlight, beam cutting across the room. The figure paused halfway, face obscured by hood. Another layer of anonymity. But then they lowered an arm, revealing a slender hand, skin pale white, clutching something small and metallic. A key? A toy? The beam glinted off it. "Stop!" I called. "Hold right there!" Torres and the others surged forward, weapons drawn. But the figure dropped from the ladder lithely, barely making a sound on the plush carpet. They fled down the hallway, moving too fast, too deliberately to be scared. The hatch slammed shut. We chased. Tiresome chase. Echoes in the corridor. Doors flung open, empty rooms whirling past. The figure vanished at the end of the hall, through the door that led back to the living room, the space where we first entered the house. We piled through that door, but found only overturned chairs and the half-cracked coffee table. Then I saw it. The main front door, wide open, daylight pouring in. The figure was gone. No sign of boots, no smear of footprints. Nothing but that key-like glint on the threshold, left behind or dropped. I reached down and picked it up. The metal was cold, heavy. It had no number or shape that matched any of the locks in the house. It looked ancient, pitted, like it belonged to a chest long buried. Before I could examine further, a soft sob trembled from the kitchen. The team froze. I listened. Another sob, human, desperate. We followed the sound. In the kitchen, there on the floor, huddled against a cabinet, was a girl, no older than 6, drenched from head to toe, hair plastered to her face. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Eyes wide, pupils dilated, staring. I froze, unable to move. Fear, relief, dread coalesced in my chest. I knelt. "Hey, little one. It's okay, you're safe now." My voice broke. She looked up. Her lips parted, and a whisper emerged. "Daddy?" My blood ran cold. The quiet that followed was so complete that I could hear every drop of water beating on the kitchen window. The other officers stood rigid, rifles lowered but still aimed. I held her gaze. Her eyes were glassy but bright, unblinking. She reached a delicate hand toward me, then recoiled, pressing her arms around herself. I motioned for officers to secure the room, shield her from sight until paramedics arrived. They complied, forming a barrier. But I stayed on my knees, close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her shoulders. She took a ragged breath, then spoke again. Only 4 words, but they echoed like gunshots in that hushed kitchen. What did I do? I froze. My mind raced through every scenario. Had she staged this? Was she held captive? Or something else entirely? The key in my pocket felt like an accusation, like she'd unlocked something we couldn't explain. I whispered back, voice raw, "Nothing. I promise, you did nothing." But deep down, I wasn't sure who I was comforting more. Her or myself. Behind me, the SWAT team breached the front door with a crash. Rifles at the ready, they swept through, securing the house end to end. The paramedics arrived, gentle but urgent, guiding the girl onto a stretcher. As they carried her out, she looked back through the kitchen doorway. Her eyes locked with mine. For a moment, I saw recognition. Then confusion, as though she didn't understand why I was there, covered in rain, gripping that strange key. She mouthed something. No sound, just movement. I leaned in until her lips were an inch from my ear. "Still here?" And then she was gone, carried out into the morning light, the team parts behind her. The front door thudded shut. I sank against the cabinet, staring at the empty doorway. The key in my pocket pulsed against my thigh. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street was silent, too quiet. I closed my eyes and tightened my grip on the key, because I knew this house hadn't given up its secrets, and neither would I. It was hours later before I stepped back across that threshold alone. The house, once teeming with flashing lights and barking dogs, now sat in stunned silence. Officers had packed up, evidence bags sealed, yellow tape fluttering at the front door. I walked the perimeter in the pale glow of street lamps, each step heavy, as if the mud itself tried to root me in place. I thought of the little girl, her eyes that bright and unblinking, the way her voice caught in my mind. Still here? I still felt the weight of that question, as if it weren't directed at me alone. I pushed my way through the open door and back into the foyer. The stale odor of fear clung to the air, thicker than humidity. In the living room, I paused before the coffee table, now stripped of cups and papers, its surface scuffed by boot heels. I traced a fingertip over the gouges, thinking of the chase, the empty rooms, the ragged footprints. The house was stripped bare of living things, but brimming with traces of something, someone, that didn't want to be found. In the corner, the hallway stretched out like a tunnel of questions. I blinked my flashlight across the baseboards. No more painted letters. The floorboards were swept clean. It was as though the house had been scrubbed of evidence as soon as the cameras turned away. I climbed the stairs, the planks groaning a low complaint. On the landing, I stopped at the cracked mirror, still fractured in 3 shafts. I caught my reflection, bloodshot eyes, jaw clenched, uniform pressed but rumpled. I wondered if I looked as haunted as I felt. I reached out and touched the cracked glass. It shivered beneath my fingers. A sudden creak behind me froze every muscle. I whirled, heart thundering. The hallway door, one of the children's rooms, hung open a sliver. I edged closer. The floor inside was bare, the walls painted a soft yellow that now looked jaundiced under my beam. The closet door was closed. From inside came a faint thump, thump, as if something small tapped against the wood. "Lieutenant?" Torres's voice drifted through the landing. He appeared at the top of the stairs, silhouetted. "I thought you cleared the second floor." I swallowed. "There's something." I gestured toward the closet. He joined me and tested the handle. Locked. "You sure?" I nodded. He produced a key ring. Among them, the strange pitted key left behind. He held it up. "Worth a try?" My fingers trembled as I took it and slipped it into the lock. The click was loud in the hush. I twisted, door swung inward. Empty. A row of hangers, no coats, swung gently, though there was no breeze. But pinned to the back wall, tape yellowed and curling, was a single photograph. The little girl. Her raincoat was the same lavender hue. She stood in front of this very house, smiling brightly, eyes shining. A date scrawled across the bottom. October 14th, 2009. 16 years ago. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Torres shone his flashlight across the floor. Footprints, fresh but smudged, leading from the closet into the corner. I crouched, examining them. Bare footprints, small toes splayed. They vanished beneath the bed. Torres exhaled. "This isn't just a call, it's a message." I rose slowly. Someone, something, has been here before us, watched us, knows exactly where to place these things. We left the closet and cleared that bedroom. In the next, I found a child's table, chairs upturned, coloring books scattered, pages filled with pictures of houses, some intact, some drawn with jagged lines, windows blackened. One picture showed a family standing outside, father, mother, daughter. The daughter was crossed out. My heart pounded. I gathered the drawings into an evidence bag. Another piece of the puzzle, but the pieces didn't add up, or they added up to something I refused to believe. Downstairs, the kitchen light burned low. Paramedics and child services workers gone, leaving bit cups of cold coffee on the counter. I slid onto a stool, head in my hands. The house groaned around me. Protestations of settling wood, or maybe something more. Torres handed me a cup. Neither of us touched it. We just weighed the silence. "Do you think she's still here?" he asked quietly. I stared at the counter. "In a way. That little girl, she's the architect of this nightmare." He nodded. "And we're the guests she invited." I rose, replacing the cup. "We need to find out who she was, who the family was that lived here in 2009, their names, everything." Torres met my gaze. "I'll start digging with records, but, Lieutenant, what if she's not alive?" I swallowed. "Then we find what remains. We bring it into the light." He hesitated, then nodded. Together, we filed out through the front door, leaving the house to its shadows. Outside, dawn was breaking, a pale streak across heavy clouds. The world beyond the tape felt distant, too bright, too mundane. I watched as the forensic van pulled up, technicians unloading gear. Cameras flashed. The scene would be catalogued, processed, turned into reports. But the house had more stories than any report could hold. I turned away, pulling the pitted key from my pocket. Its metal was cold and pitted with age, grainy under my thumb. I uncurled it, studying the ridges. Not like any house key, more like a trunk key, maybe from an attic chest, or a crypt. "Lieutenant," Torres called, "I've got something." He jogged over, waving a file folder. There was a Marion family at 213 Willow Creek. Marion, Gregory, and their daughter Eleanor moved out in December 2009. My pulse quickened. Eleanor Marion, that was her name. He continued. They left suddenly, no forwarding address. Neighbors said they just packed up in the night. Phone disconnected. Utilities cut, never heard from again. I clenched the folder. Photos of a smiling family. Eleanor in pigtails at a pink-painted table. Her eyes bright like the raincoat in my mind. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Torres laid a hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" I raised my eyes to the house. Its dark windows stared back, impassive. We go in. Again, we find every trace of Eleanor Marion. He nodded. SWAT's still securing. We can get in before they finish. I turned the key in my fingers, closed my fist around it. And we unlock this mystery, whatever it takes. As we crossed back through the threshold, the house seemed to inhale around us. The air grew heavy, expectant. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, and for a moment I hesitated. Then I strode forward, because I owed Eleanor Marion not just answers but justice for the silence she endured, and I would not leave until her story was told. It was mid-afternoon when I re-entered 213 Willow Creek alone, the air stale and heavy as if the walls themselves refused to exhale. The forensic team had left behind only the bare essentials: yellow tape tacked across door frames, numbered placards on the floor, and that strange key now dangling from my belt. I flicked on my flashlight. Its beam carved a narrow tunnel through gloom, illuminating floating dust motes that drifted like silent witnesses. I moved toward the basement door, tucked beneath the staircase, one of those unassuming panels you'd overlook on a casual walk-through. The key fit smoothly into the ancient lock. I turned it and heard the tumblers shift. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase sinking into blackness. A faint draft rose up, carrying the scent of damp earth and rot. I paused at the threshold, heart pounding. My breath came out in ragged hisses. In 20 years on this beat, I'd investigated more homicides and missing person cases than I cared to remember, but nothing had ever unsettled me like this house did. Each clue seemed deliberately laid out, like the staging of a crime scene, but a crime scene designed to haunt us. I stepped down. The metal edge of the flashlight pressed into my palm as the first step groaned under my weight. The air grew colder, each gust of wind whispering against my skin. At the bottom lay a concrete floor stained dark, water pooling in low spots, slick and oily. I swept my light across the walls. Concrete block, damp and pitted, but along one stretch the mortar had been chipped away, revealing an outline of a door frame. Someone had pried it open. My flashlight tremored as I approached. The outline was rectangular, roughly the height of a man, but the edges were jagged, as if carved by hand. Next to it lay bits of plaster, fragments of old newspaper from the 1940s, yellowed and brittle. I knelt to pick up a sliver. A headline reading, "Local Girl Vanishes Without a Trace." The date was August 1952. My mind reeled. Eleanor Marion's photograph said October 2009. But here, hidden beneath layers of concrete and decades of dust, was the press's account of a different missing child. Over half a century earlier. I pocketed the fragment, heart hammering. The chipped frame led into darkness. I pressed my flashlight against the opening, a crawl space, barely wide enough to squeeze through. The beam illuminated a patch of cracked earth deeper in, and something metallic glinted among the rubble. A small tin box, rusted and dented. I paused, listening. Silence. Then distant dripping, water echoing somewhere above. I slid inside on my stomach, breath catching as dirt scraped my uniform. The space was cramped, but the box sat within reach. I grabbed it, the metal cold against my gloves. As I lifted it, a clatter echoed behind me. The panel at the top of the stairs had snapped shut. I froze, my heartbeat thundered. I pressed against the ceiling, flashlight pointed toward the crawl opening, waiting. Seconds stretched. No movement. I exhaled, forcing calm. I eased back to the opening and dropped onto the basement floor. The box in my hand felt impossibly heavy. I pried it open with a fingernail. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, and beneath them, a small porcelain doll head, its eyes chipped but still meeting mine. My stomach churned. I untied the ribbon. The top letter's handwriting was spidery, as if penned by a child or someone impersonating childish scrawl. "Dear Daddy, I found where the lost ones sleep. I hear them calling. I'll bring them home. Love, Marie." My hands shook. Marie? Not Eleanor, not the girl we'd found. Who was Marie? And who was writing to Daddy? I flipped through the letters. Dozens of them. All dated between 1952 and 1955. Each spoke of a hidden room where children waited, lost but not gone. References to the others and "We play until you come." The final letter bore only a date. December 12th, 1955, with no closing, just the jagged line of torn paper. A distant clang, followed by hurried footsteps upstairs, jolted me. I jammed the box into my coat and sprinted for the stairs. At the top, I burst into the basement entry room, lights flickering overhead, and saw Torres standing at the door, weapon lowered but eyes wide. "What have you got?" he demanded. Before I could answer, the house groaned, a low rumble that traveled through the floorboards, shaking the walls. The single basement light snapped off, plunging us into darkness. The only illumination came from my flashlight and a dull glow through the basement door, just enough to see that someone, or something, was there with us. A child's laughter echoed up the stairs, high-pitched, manic, as if dozens of children whispered in unison. I swallowed, voice trembling. These letters, they're from 1952. Someone named Marie. She wrote to Daddy about the lost ones. Torres frowned, eyes darting to the door. But we found Eleanor, and then she was gone. Now this? I forced my flashlight toward the basement. The crawlspace door lay open, darkness spilling out like ink. The key in my pocket felt hotter, pulsing against my thigh. My breath caught as the laughter returned, louder, circling us, impossible to pinpoint. I raised the box. This house, it's been a tomb for children, decades of them, and someone's been tending it, feeding it clues, waiting to fill the silence. The laughter paused. Then, from the crawlspace, a small voice, soft, insistent, called my name, "Lieutenant?" My flashlight wavered. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The only answer was the echo of my own heartbeat. And then the crawlspace darkness rippled, and little fingers brushed my pant leg. I dropped the box. The light flickered back on. Torres shone his beam at the base of the stairs, only to find empty concrete. I knelt, glove touching the floor. There, scrawled in fresh red mud, were 2 words: "Come down." My mind screamed to get out. But I knew one thing for certain. The only way to end this nightmare was to follow those words into the darkness below. So I took a breath, steadied my grip on the flashlight, and crawled toward the crawlspace opening once more, asking myself what awaited in that hidden maze beneath the house, and praying it was not already too late. I slid back into the crawlspace without hesitation, letting the weight of the key anchor my resolve. The opening felt narrower now, as though the walls themselves had shifted in the hours since I'd first pried it open. Mud caked my uniform as I wriggled forward, flashlight beams skittering across the low ceiling. My hand brushed against damp concrete until I reached a flat section where the beam revealed a narrow tunnel branching left and right. I pressed my forehead against the cold earth and exhaled. The letters I'd found, Marie's desperate notes, burned in my mind. Now I had to follow this path she'd carved decades ago, treading in her footsteps, listening for her voice in the silence. I moved left first, the crawl tight, walls damp, water dripping steadily but faintly. The beam caught on splinters of wood embedded in the concrete, remnants of old framing that once led to a room long since sealed. I paused where the beam fell on graffiti scrawled in red clay, a child's scrawl, 2 words: "Still here." My pulse hammered. I pressed forward, leaving that message behind me. The tunnel curved, and I emerged into a low-ceilinged chamber, barely larger than a closet, lined with unpainted studs and dusty insulation. In the center sat a rusted tin lantern, its glass cracked but intact. I knelt and lit it with a match, the flame winking to life and illuminating a dozen small wooden shelves built into the walls. On each shelf lay an object: a single child's shoe, a broken toy soldier, a rusted music box, a yellowed photograph of another little girl in pigtails. My throat tightened. Every item was a relic, lost possessions of children who had vanished, their stories buried in this hidden crypt. Names etched on some: Joey, 1963, Mara, 1978, Simon, 1992. And at the end, taped in place, a final portrait of Marie herself, smiling shyly against the bare concrete, eyes bright. I picked up the music box, wound its key, and the tin gears clicked. A warped melody played, faint, wavering, like a child's lullaby half remembered. The notes echoed in the chamber, and I felt a chill as the beam played over small footprints imprinted in the dusty floor, leading deeper into darkness. My breath hitched. I followed them, lantern in one hand, key in the other. The tunnel narrowed again, then opened into a larger corridor braced with old timber beams. The smell was stronger here, earthy, clinging, as if the soil held memories. Every step echoed. Halfway down the corridor, the lantern light caught movement, a flicker of white. I froze. The shape resolved into a small door inset flush with the wall, hinges rusted. No handle. But above it, carved in the wood, I saw initials: E.M., Eleanor Marion. I knelt and felt along the edges until my fingers found a slight notch. I pressed, and the door swung inward on creaking hinges. Inside was a shallow alcove, lined with yellowed letters stacked neatly. I picked up the top envelope, addressed simply, "To Daddy, from Eleanor." Inside was a single photograph. Eleanor standing beside Marie in that same crawlspace lantern light, both beaming, 2 girls decades apart. My heart clenched. An impossible connection. Children from 1952 and 2009, bound by this hidden chamber. I rifled through the letters, each addressed to Daddy, telling of games played, others found, promises made to never leave again. Rumors in the notes that others were coming home soon, that Marie had seen them, heard them, and waited to lead them out. A distant rumble vibrated through the corridor. The ground shifted. I swallowed and looked back the way I'd come. Only darkness stared. The tunnel entrance had collapsed, a wall of dirt and stone where I'd emerged. My lantern light trembled. I pounded on the wall. No response. Panic slithered up my spine. I turned back toward the small door. At my feet lay the portrait of Marie and Eleanor, one in sepia, one in color, girls frozen in time, smiling up at me. The letters rustled, and a soft whisper brushed my ear. Come, join us. The lantern guttered. I dropped the photograph and yanked at the key on my belt. It caught on the lantern hook, slipping free with a clink. The light steadied, and in that glow I saw movement at the far end of the corridor. Tiny footprints again, circling, receding. A small handprint blossomed on the wall above the alcove, smudged crimson clay spelling. Stay. I exhaled, chest tight. Every fiber urged me to flee, but the notes, the portraits, the toys, they all demanded closure. To leave was to abandon them again. I squared my shoulders, lifted the lantern higher, and stepped into the corridor toward the footprints, toward the echo of children's laughter, determined to find the heart of this hidden city of the lost and bring it into the light, once and for all. Behind me, the wall shifted slightly, like a slow exhale, and I heard, unmistakable, a child's single voice. Thank you for coming. I pressed forward into the corridor, each step guided by the lantern's flicker and the echo of tiny footsteps that led me ever onward. The low hum of my blood in my ears seemed to merge with distant whispers of children's laughter, and instead of fear, I felt a strange determination. I squinted at the walls, rough concrete, wood beams, soaked insulation. But now, in the lantern glow, the surfaces seemed almost welcoming, as if the very structure invited me deeper. The footprints before me curved left, descending slightly, following the trench of an old utility pipe that ran along the floor. The leather of my boots squeaked against the damp stone. I clutched the key in my other hand, its pitted surface cool and oddly comforting. Whoever, whatever, had left it for me to find, I now realized it was never just a key for a door, but a token, a bond, a call to witness. At the end of the corridor, the tunnel opened into a broad chamber with a vaulted ceiling supported by sagging wooden struts. The lantern's light spilled across walls covered in chalk scrawls. Names, dates, and simple drawings. Stick figures of children holding hands. A wide door, a gaping mouth carved into stone. The floor was layered in soil, with tufts of grass sprouting where water pooled. In the center stood a metal chest, its lid rusted shut, chains wrapped around it, padlock unyielding. I stepped closer, lantern illuminating the chest's surface. On the front, hammered into the metal, were two letters, E and M, intertwined. Eleanor Marion's initials, and below, a small heart etched by a child's hand. My jaw tightened. This was the final resting place of her promise. Somewhere inside lay the truths Marie's letters hinted at, why children vanished here, what voices led them down, and perhaps how they could be guided back. I knelt and examined the chains. The padlock looked modern, no relation to the 100-year-old key at my belt. I raised the key, fitting it into the lock. It clicked. I hesitated, inhaling the damp air, tasting iron and earth. My heart hammered. Then I turned the key. The padlock fell open with a clang that reverberated through the chamber. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of items. a tattered quilt embroidered with dozens of names in childish script, a cracked wooden music box that looked identical to the one I'd wound in the small chamber above, dozens of photographs. Eleanor and Marie, smiling on the porch, playing hide-and-seek in this very basement. Hand-drawn maps of the crawl space and secret chambers, and at the bottom, a journal bound in leather, its pages yellow and frayed. My fingers trembled as I lifted the journal. On the cover, scrawled in a neat hand, "For you, when you find me." My chest tightened. The music box next to it began to play on its own, soft, slow, that warped lullaby echoing from below. I opened the journal. The first entry read, "I am here with them, but I am not lost. We have made a home in the dark, and we laugh and play until someone comes. When the night is quiet, we wander the halls and leave our marks for our Father to follow. He will come one day, and we will be free. Love, Marie." My breath caught. The writing shifted tone in the entries that followed. References to children, becoming pale, to voices that called from above and below, to windows opening into darkness where no sky shone. In the last entry, scrawled across torn paper, "He has come. The truth is in the chest. Take it and remember us. We are here." I closed the journal, voice hollow. "Here," I whispered. The chamber was silent. No laughter, no footsteps, only the drip-drip of water from unseen cracks above. I moved to pick up the quilt, the photographs, every relic that had bound these children together across decades. And then I heard it. A small sob, distant yet achingly close. My lantern swung toward a corner where the rock wall met the earth floor. There, the soil shifted, and two small hands burst forth, clawing at the ground. A child's face appeared, eyes wide, cheeks smudged with dirt, mouth trembling. It was Eleanor, exactly as she'd looked on that photograph. Hollow-cheeked, hair plastered with mud, raincoat missing but her small frame unmistakable. I dropped to my knees. "Eleanor," I breathed. She blinked, tears pooling in her eyes. "I found you," I said. She reached for me, and in that instant the lantern blew out. We were plunged into complete darkness, the music box's lullaby echoing far above like a siren's call. I fumbled for a match. Sparks flared. When light returned, she'd vanished, and in her place lay the quilt, spread open like wings, the names of Marie, Eleanor, and dozens more stitched in a perfect circle around a central name. You. I stared, chest pounding, mind racing. The quilt trembled, and the names rippled, the center name shifting from you to my badge number, then back again. My lantern flickered. I felt cold breath on my neck, and behind me in the darkness of the tunnel mouth, I heard dozens of little voices whisper, "Stay with us." I dropped the quilt and backed away, my heart thundering. The chamber's walls loosened into shadows that stretched toward me, like hands reaching. The lid of the chest slammed shut on its own, and the music box stuttered, the melody warping into a discordant drone. I fled, scrambling up the crawlspace tunnel, the voices calling after me, "Daddy, stay, come home." I burst into the basement entry room, bathed in dim light. Torres stood at the top of the stairs, his gun lowered, but eyes wide in alarm. "They're here," I rasped, voice breaking. "They're all here." I held up the quilt, trembling. "They won't let me leave." He reached for me, but I recoiled. The basement door slammed behind me, the rumble of earth filling the air. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Only the glow of my lantern remained, casting long, dancing shadows. In that dying light, I saw dozens of pale faces emerge from the walls. Children's faces, smiling with empty eyes. They pressed forward, silent but insistent. I stumbled back, heart racing, raising the lantern to keep them at bay. And then a single voice, clear above the whispering tide. "Thank you for coming home, Daddy." My breath caught. I realized, with a cold strike of terror, that the children had never vanished. They had merely gone home. Here, in this buried place where darkness was friendship and time had no meaning. I dropped the lantern. Its flame spluttered out. Darkness swallowed me. I've never left the basement since. And now I wonder if I ever will. I was 3 hours into the graveyard shift, parked under a flickering street lamp on Holloway Road, when dispatch broke the silence with that open line. No call signal, just the soft click of talk path opening and closing, then a single, ragged breath. Nothing else. I thumbed the mic. "Dispatcher, Unit 58, you got anything on that line?" Only static answered. I waited. A second ragged inhale, then silence. I cut the motor and stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. The beam from my flashlight sliced through the dark, catching rows of closed storefronts and a lone payphone that hadn't rung in decades. Somewhere, beyond the gutter, a rat skittered, and I wondered if that breath had belonged to something small, or something dangerously human. The address pinged as the old Anderson house, 3 doors down from the shuttered cafe. Nobody lived there. The place had been vacant for years. Boarded windows, wild vines strangling the porch. Reports said squatters sometimes set up camp in the back rooms. Maybe they'd pulled the handset off some ancient wiring. But why call 911 only to breathe and hang up? I slid under the board blocking the front door, the wood splintering under my weight. My light caught peeling wallpaper patterned with faded roses, and I felt that old officer's tingle, like stepping into someone else's nightmare. The beam found footprints in the dust, muddy and fresh, leading up the hallway. No echo of conversation, no television droning, just my own ragged breath and the quiet hum of the police radio in my jacket pocket. At the end of the hall, the kitchen door stood ajar. I pushed it open. The sink was filled with stale water, stained a deep rust color. A single chair lay on its side in the center of the room. I crouched, checking for prints on the linoleum floor. The mud was dry now, barely visible, but the pattern matched the boot I wore, as if someone had been following me. My heart kicked up. I slipped the radio mic from my collar. "Dispatch, house clear for entry. No sign of a caller yet. I'm moving to the rear door." No reply. That open line call must have dropped before dispatch even registered it. I gripped my flashlight tighter and edged toward the back of the house. Outside, the night pressed in, thick and alive with unseen movement. The full moon sunk behind clouds, stealing what little light I'd had. At the back porch, I heard it. A soft creak, like a floorboard settling. I paused, breath suspended, and waited. Nothing. Then saw the door still closed, the knob spinning slowly, not turning, just drifting in the breeze. I eased forward, hand hovering above my holster. That breeze carried a faint click, almost a whisper. "Help!" I snapped my head around, but the yard was empty. The tall grass rustled without a figure. I pushed the door open. My light fell on the living room. Furniture stacked against the far wall, as if someone had swept everything away to make room. The only thing left was a small, battered radio sitting on the floor, antenna bent at a ragged angle. I knelt, turned it on. Static splintered the silence, then faded to dead air. I lifted the lid of the kitchen table drawer nearby and found a cell phone. Screen cracked, but powered on. It displayed a single missed call. 911. No number, no timestamp. I pocketed the phone, unease settling in my gut. The heaviness of the house felt like a living thing. I called out, "If you're here, speak up." My voice sounded thin. No answer. I stood and scanned the shadows. Behind me, the radio crackled again, weak but clear. "Don't leave." My skin crawled. That voice wasn't over the police frequency. It was inside my head. I spun, hand on my holster, adrenaline flooding, but saw only the corner of the room, half in shadow, where the furniture lean revealed a narrow gap behind the wall, a crawl space. I knelt, peered inside. The beam caught a pair of eyes reflecting back at me. Small, human, terrified. A child? Or someone pretending? I told myself I'd seen too many bad horror movies. "Come on out," I said calmly, forcing my voice to stay steady. There was a shuffle, then a small figure emerged. Thin, shirt torn, skin smudged with dust. A boy, maybe 8. He looked at me with hollow eyes, shaking. No words, just trembling lips and that same ragged breath. I reached out, but he lurched back as if fear alone could repel my hand. Then the lights overhead cut out. We were in pitch black. I fumbled for my flashlight, heart drumming so loud I could hear it. When I clicked it back on, boy and doorway were empty. The gap behind the wallpaper was pressed flush. No sign of crawlspace. I spun, scanning every shadow. My radio's open line wheezed again, static, and then the boy's breath, drawn in shallow pants right behind me. I whirled, and the porch door slammed shut upstairs. I froze, barely daring to move. Upstairs, where I'd already checked. I exhaled, the sound loud enough to echo. The hush that followed was worse than any noise. I let it sit against my ears, pinned myself to the floorboards, waiting for a clue. But the only thing I got was the unmistakable sound of slow, deliberate footsteps tapping on wood above me. I lifted my head to look at the ceiling, every sense straining. The footsteps stopped over my head. A heartbeat passed. Then another. Then a faint whisper, so soft I thought I'd imagined it. "Are you watching?" That was all. No response. No answer. Just the faint, echoing drip of water somewhere deep in the walls. I swallowed, caught my radio in one hand, flashlight in the other. My mouth went dry. I realized I had no backup en route, no idea who I'd just seen or what that phone call really was. And nothing in the report would ever prepare me for what happened next. I looked up at the ceiling again, breath caught in my throat, and waited. The beam of my flashlight trembled against the ceiling long enough for my mind to race through every possible explanation. Squatters hiding behind the walls, a prank pulled by drunks, or something far more sinister that I didn't even want to name. My radio crackled again, open line. I tore it from my jacket, voice tight. "Dispatch, Unit 58, please advise status. I need backup now." Patience stretched thin. The only reply was static, and then the faintest shuffle of paper or cloth, like someone fumbling with a map in the dark. I set the radio down, switching on the flashlight's high beam and sweeping it across the room. No sign of furniture, no closet tucked off to the side, just bare plywood floors and the ripped seams of where the crawl space had been. I swallowed, the dust in my throat burning, and took a slow step toward the staircase. Each footfall felt heavy, as if the house itself welcomed me in deeper. My hand reached for the banister and I felt a chill, metal cold, slick with moisture. I lifted the beam upward. The stairs arched into shadows, each tread splintered and uneven. I paused halfway up, where a single board had been pried loose and lay at an odd angle. Beneath, a rough scratch gouged into the wood, as if someone had tried to carve words. H-E-L, but it trailed off into jagged chips. Something about that half-formed plea made my heart stutter. I climbed the rest of the way and stepped onto the upper hall, breath shallow. Up there, the narrow hallway curved left and right, 2 doors, one on either side. The left-hand door was cracked open, revealing pitch darkness beyond. The right was closed, paint-chipped, a tarnished brass knob dusty. I hesitated, instinct screaming, but the faintest click came from the left room, like a latch settling. I forced my voice low. "If you're hurt, you need medical attention." No answer. Nothing but that low, unsteady hum in the walls. I pressed forward into the left room. The silence swallowed me. My flashlight swept over a mattress on the floor, stained dark brown along its edges. A window stood broken, shards of glass glittering in the beam. A white sheet was draped over something in the corner, the shape tall, unmoving. Muscle memory kicked in. I moved toward it, gun raised. I heard my own blood pounding in my ears. I reached out, flicked the corner of the sheet aside. Beneath lay a bicycle, twisted frame bent over itself, as if someone had thrown it against the wall. That hum in the walls turned into a low moan, barely audible, like metal scraping metal. My chest tightened, and I swallowed around the dryness. I backed out of the room, adrenaline twisting my hands. Behind me, the sheet rustled, though I hadn't touched it again. I whirled. Nothing. The beam landed on the closed door at the end of the hall, and I knew it wasn't over. I moved toward it, every step a decision I couldn't take back. I paused at the knob. My reflection in the tarnished metal stared back, eyes wide, mouth set. Then the breath came again, right behind me, ragged, closer than the boys had been downstairs. I froze, heat flooding my face as the air caught in my throat. "Who is it?" I whispered into the hush. Only my own echo answered. My hand twisted the knob. The door swung inward without a sound of hinges, smooth like an invitation. Inside was a nursery. A single crib sat in the center, empty mattress sagging. Toys lay scattered across the floor, a ragged teddy bear missing an eye, wooden blocks spelling out something in faded letters that couldn't quite be read. On the far wall, scrawled in charcoal, the words, "Help me," complete this time, urgent and jagged. I stepped forward. My flashlight bounced from the crib to the writing, and I realized something was off. The blocks on the floor spelled out the same word. Every toy pointed toward the crib. I swallowed, hand trembling on my radio, but I didn't speak. I didn't want to break the fragile thread of silence the house had woven. Then the crib's side latch clicked as if released. I moved in, breathing slow to keep from alerting whoever, or whatever, might be inside. The mattress dipped like weight settling onto springs. I shone the light in. Empty. No child, no body, nothing. Just the imprint of someone's small shape pressed into the sagging fabric. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might be mistaken for footsteps. My blood pounded in my ears. I lifted the edge of the mattress and found a folded photograph taped underneath. An older man in uniform, smile tight, arm around a little girl with braids. On the back, in a child's scrawl, "Daddy, come home." I pressed the photo against my heart. I heard a soft whisper nearly lost by the static of my radio. "Daddy?" I spun. The hallway behind me was empty. The hush returned, pressing on my chest so hard I could barely breathe. I realized I couldn't trust my senses. I'd seen footprints, heard breathing, and found a boy who vanished into walls. Now, a baby's cry echoed faintly down the hall, torn by distance and walls. I took a step toward the door, ready to run, but guilt knotted in my gut. Someone here needed help. Someone clung to me through this house's fractures in time. I squared my shoulders, voice rough when I spoke. "I'm here to help." My words hung, unanswered. The final word of that whisper, "Daddy," lingered in my skull as I crossed the threshold back into the hall, determined to find whoever was still trapped in Holloway Road's old Anderson house. The baby's cry swelled, echoing off the walls, shifting into a pulse that matched my own heartbeat. I followed it upward to the attic hatch at the end of the hall. The small door groaned as I lifted it, revealing steep, skinny steps that disappeared into black. My flashlight illuminated, floating, dust motes swirling in a current I couldn't see. The cry sharpened, urgent now, as if someone up there only had seconds before they lost their voice entirely. I climbed, each step testing my resolve. My radio's open line crackled in sync with my ragged breathing. The attic floorboards felt alive under my boots, creaking in time with the cry. And then, at the top, the hatch slammed shut behind me. The board hit with a dull thud I felt in my bones. I lunged for the radio, but it lay at the bottom of the steps, out of reach. Now I was alone, in absolute darkness, save for the weak beam of my flashlight. The baby's cry had stopped. I held my breath, listening. My pulse thundered, sweat beating on my forehead. Then I heard it, a single, measured heartbeat coming from somewhere above. I edged forward, mouth dry, every nerve alight with tension. The heartbeat grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like the attic itself was alive. The whisper came again, so close I thought it was in my ear. Daddy. That one word, repeated in the darkness, and it carried the weight of all the unanswered questions that had led me here. I raised my flashlight, hand shaking, and stepped into pitch black, straight toward a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I gripped the hatch frame, knuckles white, and forced it open. My flashlight cut a narrow cone of light into the attic's darkness, the beam catching motes in the air that looked like drifting embers. The cry hadn't returned, only the echo of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. My boots hit the rough plank floor, and I shone the light around. The attic was cramped, sloped ceilings hemming me in, dusty boxes stacked haphazardly, and in the center a small rocking chair, its cushion torn and soiled. I edged forward, every nerve braced. The chair rocked gently, back and forth, though no breeze stirred. I sank to one knee, running a hand over the armrest, feeling the wood cold and slick. Then I saw it. Footprints in the dust. Tiny, bare, 2 sets. One set ended at the chair, and the other led beyond, toward the far wall where the boards looked newer, less worn. I stood, shining the light up at the wall. The boards gave way to a narrow crawl space. I dropped the beam through the gap, just enough room for a small child to slip through. My gut clenched. Whoever had cried out here had used that space to disappear. I pressed my back against the opposing wall, leaned in until I could hear the hollow whistle of stale air moving through. No other sound, nothing moving. I slipped my radio from my belt. Dispatcher, yes, Unit 5-8. I'm in the attic, no sign of the child. There's a crawl space behind the far wall. I need entry confirmation. My voice echoed and died against the rafters. No reply. Static, the faint hiss of open mic. I swallowed, forced my voice steady. I'm going in. I dropped the radio and knelt, shining the beam into the narrow tunnel. It disappeared into pitch. I crawled forward on my stomach. The dust under my palms was thick, layers of years unbroken. My uniform brushed the wood, and something snagged, soft, cloth-like. I pulled it free, a small scrap of pajama fabric, faded pink with cartoon ducks. My breath caught. The cut in the boards was just big enough for a child that age. Ahead, the tunnel sloped down. I took deep, measured breaths, every inch forward a gamble. About 8 feet in, I reached a solid board. I pressed my shoulder against it. The wood creaked. I kicked with my foot. The board shifted inward, and behind it, in the deeper darkness, I heard the softest shuffle of movement. A whimper so quiet it could have been my own fear echoing back. I pried the board enough to slip through. My flashlight illuminated a low-ceilinged chamber the size of a broom closet. The air was thick and stale. A single cardboard box lay open on the floor. Inside, a small blanket, a plastic sippy cup, and a crumpled note. I swept the light over the note. Letters scrawled in a child's hand. "Daddy, don't leave." My throat closed. At that moment, something brushed against my ankle. I jerked back, heart racing, and my light flicked down. A small figure sat in the corner, legs pulled tight, arms wrapped around knees, head buried. I crouched, voice low. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here." No movement. I reached out a hand. The child looked up, eyes wide, hollow, skin pale as chalk. Tears carved dark trails down dusty cheeks. I swallowed. "I'm Officer Diaz. I'm going to get you out of here." The child's gaze fixed on me. He whispered, voice trembling. "He said, keep me safe." My pulse hammered. I set the flashlight on the floor, unholstered my radio pistol. "Buddy, do you know who that is?" He shook his head. "He's upstairs, in the shadows." A muffled thump came from above. Something heavy moved across the attic ceiling, slow, deliberate. The child yanked at my jacket. "Please, hurry." I scooped him into my arms. He felt like glass, trembling. I turned back to the board opening. As I pressed through, I heard a low rumble behind me, like a growl echoing through the wood. I scrambled back, hugging the child tight. The attic hatch banged shut above us. The trembling of the house vibrated through my boots. I grasped the hatch and kicked upward. It wouldn't budge. My radio lay inches out of reach. The darkness pressed in, and the child buried his face in my chest. I held him close, whispering, "I've got you." Then a voice rumbled from the ceiling. Deep, raspy, not quite human. "He can't keep you safe." My breath caught. My free hand hovered over my holster. The radio crackled faintly beneath the hatch. The child stiffened, and I realized in the weight of his small body that escape might not come the way I hoped. I shifted, one arm braced against the hatch, the other holding the child, and looked up into the black plank above. The voice came again, whispering through the wood grain, "Leave me behind." My lower lip trembled. The beam of my flashlight wavered as tears threatened. Mine, not the boy's. I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run, to tear through the hatch and race for daylight. But I couldn't leave him. I pressed my back to the wall, helmet cold against my temple. I waited. The house moaned around me. On the radio, static sighed, and I knew dispatch still thought I was upstairs alone. I closed my eyes, heart roaring. Then the words slipped out, "Not this time." The hatch screamed as I kicked again, this time fueled by everything I'd ever sworn to protect. The wood cracked, and I shouted, voice raw, "Hold on." I kicked at the hatch again, the wood splintering under my boot. The child's small body trembled against my chest as the darkness held its breath. I dropped to my knees, pressing my shoulder into the broken frame until light spilled through the crack, illuminating sawdust motes dancing in the stale air. I hauled myself forward, back first, until the top edge scraped against my helmet. Every nerve screamed, but I kept pushing. With a final surge, I cleared the hatch and collapsed onto the attic floor. The child buried his face in my uniform, clutching me like a lifeline. I yanked free my radio and barked, "Dispatch, 5-8. I've got the juvenile. Exit route clear." My words rattled in the cramped space, but no engines roared outside. No backup lights cut through the attic window. only the echo of my own voice. I rose, supporting the boy's weight as I limped toward the opening. Each step felt heavier, as if the house itself was pulling me back. The cry I'd first heard, so distant, so urgent, had vanished. In its place was an oppressive silence that pressed against my eardrums. The only sound was the rasp of my own breathing. I reached the hatch and pried it open, expecting the stairwell, but found only darkness yawning beneath me. The stairs had gone, the planks torn away, leaving a jagged chasm. My heart slammed. The boy whimpered, and I realized in that moment that the house would give nothing back except its own riddles. I set the child on his feet and knelt beside him. He blinked up at me, eyes wide with terror and confusion. "Daddy?" he whispered, voice small. I swallowed, a knot forming in my throat. I reached into my pocket and produced the photograph, the man in uniform, smiling, arm around a little girl. The girl's eyes in the photo were bright, but the child before me looked hollow. He reached for the picture. "He left me here," the boy said, voice cracking. "Said I was safe." His glance flicked to the opening behind us. I followed his gaze, but saw only the planks and the dust motes swirling in the shaft of my flashlight. I stood and lifted the child, holding him tight. "I'm not letting you go," I said, voice firm. I tried again to find the stairs, but only scraped my boot against broken wood. I turned, looking for another way out, any exit. The attic's far wall loomed, lined with boxes and trunks. My light landed on one trunk, half hidden in shadow. I set the boy gently on the floor and pried it open. Inside lay an old uniform jacket, moth-eaten and stiff, a cracked badge pinned to the breast. I recognized the insignia, County Sheriff's Department, years out of circulation. My pulse quickened. I pulled it free and read the tarnished nameplate. Anderson. I shook with memory. Anderson, the missing officer from the year before, the one who vanished with his daughter Lily. The same house, the same attic. I slid the jacket around my shoulders and it felt icy, as if it absorbed the faint light rather than reflecting it. The boy looked up at me, tears brimming. "He's here," he said, voice hollow. I swallowed, unease coiling in my gut. "Who's here?" The boy pointed at the far corner of the attic, where the wall seams were warped, as if something had pushed from behind. I edged closer, flashlight trembling. The boards there were split, scratches gouged into the wood, deep, jagged lines forming a message. I knelt and traced the grooves, breath catching. I never left. The boy's eyes flicked away from me, focused above. I aimed the light up toward the ceiling beams and my blood froze. There, perched on a joist, was a dark shape hunched low. Too slender and long-limbed for any child, its form obscured by shadow. The head turned, and I glimpsed a pair of eyes, reflective, unblinking, and too large for any human skull. I stumbled back, bumping into the trash trunk. The child cried out, and I swept him into my arm, spinning to face the shape. It dropped from the joist without a sound, landing inches from us. My gun hand trembled, but I held off, pulling the trigger. The thing stood, limbs crooked, head tilted. It whispered, its voice a warped echo of a man's, layered with a child's timbre. "Have you come for me?" My heart hammered as it stepped closer, the air turning icy. The boy whimpered, burying his face in my chest. I could feel the thing's breath, cold, stale. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. All I could do was hug the child tighter. Then, as if sensing my resolve, it recoiled, melting back toward the joist, blending into the dark until only its eyes glimmered. The attic grew still. The boy squeezed my neck. I felt the weight of every unanswered question. The missing officer, the vanished daughter, the child who had called me Daddy, the whisper that lingered in the rafters. I pressed the photo to my chest, feeling the boy's small hand close over mine. The shape on the joist watched, and I realized I couldn't leave. Not without knowing what had trapped them here, what had lured them into these walls. So I whispered back, voice steady despite the terror clawing at me. "No, I'm here for you." The thing's eyes gleamed once more, then faded. And in that silence, thicker than the house itself, I understood there was no escaping the truth hidden in these boards. A single floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, flashlight catching the boy, now standing alone, the form of two, pressed into one shadow. He tilted his head. "Are you?" he asked. The attic felt impossibly still, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I hugged the boy close, his small frame trembling against my chest, and let my flashlight sweep slowly over the walls. The boards where the thing had perched were splintered. The jagged edges looked fresh, like something had torn its way through the grain. My uniform jacket, Anderson's old sheriff coat, hung heavy on my shoulders, its weight a reminder that I was stepping into another man's unfinished business. I set the boy down gently on the dusty floor and straightened, voice low. "Stay close," I told him. He nodded, eyes wide, pressed his cheek against my leg. I forced myself to breathe evenly, though my ribs ached and my heart rattled in my chest. I refocused the flashlight toward the far corner of the attic, where the curl of shadow seemed darker than the rest. Stepping toward it, I crossed under low rafters smeared with cobwebs. Each footfall stirred motes of dust into the stale air, the beam catching them like tiny sparks. I passed a stack of old trunks, moth-eaten coats, faded photographs, a tin toy train with wheels rusted stiff. Each object whispered of a life once lived here, now frozen in this silent tomb. At the end of the attic, the wall seam had bowed outward, as though something behind it was pushing to break free. I knelt, shining the light along the gap. The seams had widened overnight, cracks running horizontally that hadn't been there before. My pulse fluttered. I rested a hand on the old wood, and it felt warm beneath my glove, as though it had absorbed body heat. I looked down at the child. His eyes were fixed on the gap, unblinking. "He's behind there," the boy murmured, voice a thread of fear. "He wants me." I swallowed and aimed the beam directly into the opening. The light disappeared into a crawl space that sloped downward, the planks damp and slick. "Show me where he went," I said firmly. He nodded, stepping forward. I reached for him, hesitated, then let him lead. Together, we entered the tunnel. The air grew colder, thicker, smelling of earth and rot. I half crawled, half slid, inch by inch, the beam bobbing ahead of me. The tunnel opened into a low-ceilinged chamber, narrower and darker than the first. Here, the walls were lined with what looked like insulation panels, but they were stained deep brown, and at the far end, a small puddle reflected the beam's glare. I pressed my boot against the puddle's edge. The water rippled, though nothing had disturbed it. I knelt and touched it, icy, oily to the skin. I traced the perimeter. Halfway around, my glove snagged on something. I swept the light down. A single boot lay half buried in the muck, size 12 county sheriff issue. My breath caught. I reached in and pulled the boot free. The mud clung, peeling away to reveal the name, stitched inside. A. Anderson. My pulse thudded in my throat. The sheriff who'd disappeared with his daughter, his boot, here in this hidden pit. I looked up, beam sweeping the chamber. boxes of files stacked along the walls, discolored manila folders labeled missing persons, then more crudely with the same jagged letters I'd seen upstairs. Don't leave. A new whisper slithered through the tunnel. Don't forget me. I pressed my back against the damp wall, sliding down until I sat, knee-high water pooling around me. The boy knelt beside me, a small hand reaching for mine. He's alone, the boy said. He's scared. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of it settle. Anderson's boot, the files, the hidden pit meant to imprison. I'd come hunting for a ghost, but what I found was a man desperate to protect his child, even if it meant trapping them both. My radio crackled in my belt, but I ignored it. Right now, the facts and procedures didn't matter. All that mattered was getting them out. I folded Anderson's sheriff coat, draped it over the boy's shoulders. His small frame disappeared under the oversized sleeves. He looked up at me, tears mingling with mud on his cheeks. I gave him my flashlight. You stay here, I whispered. I'll find a way out and come back. He shook his head, voice fierce in its steadiness. No, you stay. I swallowed hard, seeing myself in his fierce eyes, both of us alone in a dark pit, surrounded by memory and fear. I settled beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. The tunnel was big enough for two. If the sheriff had learned anything in his last hours, it was that you didn't face this house alone. I clicked on my radio. Dispatch, Agent 58. I found evidence of a hidden cellar under the attic. Discovery critical, code red. I need a team here ASAP. My voice echoed against the wood. Then I turned it off. No need for their voices now. Not until I knew he could come home. We sat there, the boy leaning against my side, the brim of Anderson's cap shadowing his eyes. I stared into the dark tunnel, listening to the drip of water, the soft shifting of earth. Outside, the world carried on, sirens, calls, the regular pulse of life. But in this place, time had stopped. I slid my hand into my pocket and withdrew the photograph. I held it before the boy's eyes, the smiling officer, his little girl, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. The boy touched the picture gently. Is that you? I closed my eyes, voice thick. Yes, I'm him now. He nodded, slipping the photo into his coat pocket. He took my hand. Together we closed our eyes and waited. Because whatever haunted this house, whatever had twisted love into a trap, wouldn't give up its secrets without an audience. And I promised, then and there, that I would stay until it told me everything. The tunnel's cold air pressed against us as I shifted beside the boy, the stolen minutes stretching thin into every heartbeat. I'd thought finding out the truth meant freedom. Yet, here we sat, hemmed in by floorboards and memory. The boy's head rested against my shoulder, breathing slow and steady beneath the weight of that battered coat. I loosened my grip on the photograph in my hand, the one he'd slipped into his pocket, and let the beam of my flashlight play over the damp walls. I studied the manila folders stacked behind us. Each one bore a yellowed label, names of missing children, dates that bled into the page, scribbled notes in handwriting that grew more frantic toward the bottom. I fished out one folder at random. Miller, June 1999, unresolved. I flipped it open. A single sheet, a crayon drawing of a family, parents arm in arm, a little girl between them, a crooked smile drawn in black wax. The margins were smeared, as if someone had tried to hide tears in the lines. I closed the folder gently. Whoever kept these files here hadn't meant them to be found. The boy shifted, pressing his damp cheek into my side. He was keeping them safe, he said quietly. Upstairs, he kept us safe. His voice trembled at that past tense, and I realized his story wasn't only about a ghost or a missing officer. It was about a father who'd done whatever it took to protect his child, until he couldn't anymore. I swung my light across the chamber. The puddle near the boot gleamed black. Another ragged file lay floating where the water pooled, label torn away. I leaned forward, hands trembling slightly, and plucked it out. It tore in my glove. Inside was a single photograph. Anderson, sitting at a kitchen table with 2 cups of hot coffee, steam curling upward, his daughter perched on his lap. They smiled at the lens, unaware. Written on the back in precise cursive, "Our last morning together." No date, no further notes. My throat tightened. "He never left, did he?" I whispered. The boy nodded, eyes distant. I placed the photo beside the boot and stood, crouching over the narrow shaft of the tunnel. Mud dripped from my boots. In the distance, I heard the scrape of wood above, like someone pacing beneath the ceiling we both backed away from. "He's still here," I told the boy. His fingers dug into the coat's fabric, eyes shining. "I want to see him." I swallowed hard. I'd sworn to protect him, to be his guardian now. Then we see him together. I returned to the larger chamber and pressed the flashlight beam upward, catching the nails driven at odd angles into the ceiling joists, the very place where that dark shape had perched. Now the timbers quivered as if settling under weight. I clipped my radio to my belt and snapped it on. "Dispatch, this is 5-8. I'm in the hidden chamber under the attic at Anderson House. I'm going back up. Stand by." No response. I switched it off. Protocol felt meaningless here. I lifted the boy, cradling him as I backed through the tunnel. Every twist and turn blurred memory and reality. Dusty walls closing in, the wet, slick slope, the thump of water underfoot. When I emerged into the attic, I half expected the ceiling to loom closer, the joists to groan in protest. But the room was unchanged, silent guardians of secrets. The rocking chair still motionless. The toy train rusted in place. The hatch above us was splintered from my earlier kick, gaps wide enough that moonlight cut slanted shafts across the floor. I set the boy down and climbed to my feet, brushing sawdust from my coat. He watched me, eyes wide with both hope and an echo of his father's desperation. I squared my shoulders and shone the light toward the hatch, then around the attic's perimeter, where the shadowed doorway led back to the hallway. If he wanted to see Anderson, that man, if he still existed, would be waiting in the rooms beyond. I took a deep breath and lifted the boy again. "Stay close," I said. He nodded, forehead pressed against my cheek. We moved toward the attic door. The latch squeaked softly as I opened it, and the hallway stretched out in dim light. The closed right-hand door beckoned. Paint chipped, knob dull. It hadn't budged earlier, but now it stood slightly ajar. I pushed it fully open and stepped inside. The bedroom was empty, save for a rocking toy horse ticking mechanically, its pendulum arm moving back and forth, slowing into stillness as we entered. I crossed to the window and shone my light outside. Branches swayed under the moon, distant traffic humming. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Then the door behind us clicked shut. I spun. The boy clutched my coat. I crossed back, reached for the door, but found only solid paint. No hinge visible. The room felt smaller suddenly, oppressive. I shone the flashlight on the floor. There, footprints, tiny, dust-coating prints, led from the windowsill to the far corner, where a pillow lay on the floor. I lifted it. Underneath, a tarnished locket. My beam lit the tarnish. 2 initials engraved, A and L, surrounded by a heart. I opened it. A tiny photo, a girl with braids, smiling. The same girl in my photograph. My blood ran cold. I slipped the locket into my pocket and turned to the boy. He pointed to the bed. I aimed the light and stepped forward. The mattress was folded back neatly, sheets crisp. At the foot, carved into the wooden frame in the same jagged script I'd seen before, "Don't leave." His finger traced the letters. "He's here," he said, "and he's waiting." His voice was so soft it might have been swallowed by the house itself. I swallowed around a lump in my throat. "Then we find him," I said. I crossed to the door again, sliding my hand along the wall until I found a narrow crack, just enough to slip through. Beyond was the sloped hallway, lit by a single flickering bulb, the one that cut out earlier. I nudged the crack until the wall panel swung inward, revealing a narrow stair descending. The boy's eyes widened. "He made a way," I muttered. We descended together. The steps creaked beneath our weight. At the bottom, I found myself in a small study, dusty bookshelves lining the walls, a desk with a single lamp casting a sickly yellow glow. Papers lay strewn across it, Anderson's handwriting, neat until the final pages, where the ink smeared into frantic scrawls. I grabbed the top sheet and read, "I can't let her go. The world is too cruel. She's safe here." I swallowed. On the desk, a photograph of the man and his daughter, framed. Her eyes bright, his half-smile weary. I recognized the desk from the first-floor living room photo that had been missing from the house. A soft murmur drifted from behind me. I swung the light, gun raised, expecting the dark shape. Instead, I found the boy standing before a tall mirror propped in the corner. He stared into it. In the reflection behind him stood the officer, older now, uniform stained, face hollow, but his daughter's small hand grasped his own. The boy's breath caught. "Daddy," he whispered. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling, training the beam on the mirror's surface. The officer's reflection tilted his head, eyes locking with mine. Then he raised a hand, slow, hesitant, pressing his palm against the glass from the inside. I drew near, feeling heat emanate from the frame. "Sir," I said, voice thick. The reflection's lips quivered, but no sound came. His daughter in the mirror reached up, placing her small hand on her father's. The boy, behind me, dropped to his knees, pressing his cheek against mine. He wept quietly, and in his tears, I heard that same ragged inhale I'd first answered 3 weeks earlier. I knelt beside him, heart pounding so loud I was sure the man behind the glass could hear it. I held the boy close, whispering, "I won't leave you." His sobs stilled. The reflection in the mirror flickered, the edges wavering, and the officer's mouth opened, soundless at first, then a faint whisper carried through the glass. "Thank you." The girl in the reflection smiled then, cheeks flushed, and she stepped toward me. But the mirror broke. Cracks spidered from the center outward, shattering light into jagged prisms. The reflection dissolved into darkness. The lamp flickered out, plunging the room into silence. I rose, cradling the boy, and led him toward the stairs. Behind us, the walls groaned, as if bidding farewell. Outside, the front door stood open. Moonlight spilled across the porch. I stepped into it, felt cool night air on my face. The boy clung to me, blinking in the light. I led him to my cruiser in the silent street. As I settled him into the passenger seat, I noticed the locket around his neck glinting in the glow of the dashboard. Its chain was tight but not strangling, just enough to remind him of what he'd lost and what he still held. I got behind the wheel and watched the old Anderson house shrink in the rearview mirror. No more crawl spaces, no hidden chambers, but the power of what I'd witnessed pressed on my chest. The boy's eyelids drooped, exhaustion finally claiming him. I clicked my seatbelt across his coat and whispered, You're safe now." He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch. As I pulled onto Holloway Road, headlights sweeping the curves, I thought I saw a figure in the attic window, a silhouette framed by moonlight. I squinted, but it vanished. My radio crackled to life. 5-8, you okay? Dispatch asked. I cleared my throat. I'm fine. Starting transport to the station. I switched off the radio, listening instead to the boys' soft breathing. The locket's chain tapped against my armrest. I reached out, lifted it in my hand, feeling the initials A and L pressed into the metal. I closed my fingers around it and asked aloud, to the empty passenger seat, to the house behind me, to every echo of unanswered calls. Would you have left me behind?